Hey guys, I'm Urazi. This story is all about what if Naruto was assigned to Asuma and Team 10. Mizuki never got to shoot his mouth off at Naruto the night he took the Scroll of Seals. Other than skipping a half-manic monologue from him, what exactly did this change for everyone's favorite blonde ninja? Who knows? Before we proceed with the story, please like and subscribe to this channel if you liked the video, and don't forget to check the description for the other works of the author if you liked the story. Let's start. Chapter 24, Eyes of the World. In a special box set aside for the visiting Kage and their guards, 4 of the 5 powerful village leaders sat up top watching attentively along with Mifune. The teams in the final round are comparably young this year. Other than Kirigaku's representatives, Omegaku's, and Iwagaku's of course. The calm, even-tempered samurai general commented. The Raikage, a large, burly dark-skinned man with slicked-back white hair and a mustache and goatee, let out a barking laugh in his ceremonial robes. If you don't get promoted young and get over that hump early, it's hard to go far in our line of work. 2 of those kids down there were trained by my younger brother, and Samui herself should have gotten promoted last year. She was too heavily injured to continue into the combat test after the survival portion of the test. How unfortunate. The Kazekage said. Under his hat he had spiky auburn hair and a stern look on his face as he looked down at all of the genin walking away from the field to head up to their viewing area. But Temari, Kankuro, and Gaara are the absolute best in Suno without question. I even considered sending them, and only them, to make a point that the quality of our shinobi can overwhelm any odds. I bit his tongue at mentioning that those overwhelming odds ended with them in the easiest bracket of the tournament as Hiruzen spoke up instead. Raikage Dano, where is the sensei of your team in the upcoming match? Killer B has his own responsibilities in addition to teaching Omoi and Karui. I explained, he's Kumo's guardian by my decree. He can't really leave. At that, the Chuchikage let out a scoff. What a waste of such a powerful shinobi. The Chuchikage was a very short old man with a rather bulbous nose and a smirk on his face. You two were very infamous as the AB duo. Weren't you two supposed to be unbeatable when fighting together? I guess that's as good a use for a Jinchuriki key as any I've thought of, though. Clicked his teeth loudly in irritation. That was his brother the Chuchikage was talking about. You should watch how you talk about people, Onaki. He said evenly. I believe we should pay attention to the fights now. Down on the field, the proctors decided to referee the one-on-one fights one at a time, with Jay being the first to do so from a neutral starting point in the Zen Garden. Over on Team Guy's side of the field, it seemed like Neji was going to walk over first, but before he could do so, Lee raced out ahead of him and came to a stop right in front of Jay, much to Neji's chagrin apparently, as Tenten palmed her face at Lee's exuberance. Okay. I'm guessing you're first up for your team. Yes, Proctor-san. Rock Lee at your service and ready for combat. He said, giving a thumbs up and a smile, complete with glistening white teeth. Show everyone the power of your youth, Lee. A very distinctly youthful voice shouted over the low rumbling of the crowd anticipating the first match. Hey, sit down and stop yelling, weird guy. That jumpsuit of yours is disturbingly tight. A spectator nearby the first shout said. Jay scratched his bald head awkwardly at Lee's rather eccentric demeanor. He turned his head to see Karui walking towards him, rolling her shoulders out as a rudimentary way to get her arms loose and limber. Looks like it's time to get this show on the road. The first round match, Fight 1, Rock Lee of Konoha versus Karui of Kumo. Are both competitors ready? He asked, looking at Lee, who had slipped in his special stance, and Karui, who had gotten into her own ready position, getting nods from both. Begin. He yelled before jumping away. Before the last syllable left Jei's mouth, Karui's hand was on the hilt of her katana and drawn in a quick slash directed at Lee. Kumoryu Omotagiri, cloud-style front beheading. Lee immediately leapt backwards out of the range of Karui's strike before getting back into his stance. You have a very quick draw of your weapon, Karui-san. With that blade you have extra reach on me. He said with a smile on his face. Karui held up her sword defensively, prepared for Lee to attempt to use a jutsu as a ranged attack. What she most certainly didn't expect was for Lee to run right for her faster than she had anticipated. What the hell? She thought to herself as Lee launched a high kick at her. Idiot. She lifted her sword, prepared to cleave his leg off if he was really stupid enough to attack her like that. Who attacks a person with a sword using just Taijut dash? Konoha Senpyu, Leaf Whirlwind. Instead of the high kick she had been anticipating, it had been a feint, which allowed Lee a clear shot at her body with a kick that drove deep into her ribs and snatched the wind right out of her lungs. Karui was sent backwards, sliding across the sandy ground before coming to a stop against one of the meditation rocks. She hopped back up to her feet but moved too fast for her own body's good and hurt her ribs even more with an overextended movement. Wow, that kick was heavy. I could have cut your leg off just now. For Kami's sake, why didn't you use a jutsu, you lunatic? Lee let out a laugh. I wish that I could, but I am completely unskilled in the use ninjutsu or genjutsu, thus I am forced to rely solely on taijutsu. If you haven't noticed this before, you would have by the time I defeated you. Yeah, right. Karui said as she held her sword up with one hand while gingerly holding her ribs. Damn it, I need Omoi. He was fast enough before he messed my ribs up, and now I'm even slower. Please surrender. Lee asked her. I would rather not hurt a maiden such as yourself for no reason, even in the Chunin exams. You talk too much. Karui said in return, trying to mask the fact that Lee kicked like a horse and she was injured. One damn hit. Lee frowned, but if nothing else respected her decision to continue the fight as he once again closed the distance against Karui. Karui put her back against the rock she had hit earlier to cut off an avenue for the faster Lee to get a better striking angle on her. Taijutsu skill or not, she still had a sword, and if anything came near her in the form of an attack, she would slice it clean off. As an example, Lee attempted to come in from the side opposite the hand she was holding her katana with, her wounded side. Once he got close enough to reach, she let loose a horizontal slash with both hands that almost bifurcated Lee. Lee jumped back with a frown, having suffered a rip in the front of his jumpsuit and a shallow cut on his torso. Karui stood at the ready, at this point beginning to get down Lee's timing and moving tactics. With a hard look on his face, Lee reached down the neck of his jumpsuit for an object, getting a feeling of alarm from Karui. Duh. Of course he's armed. She thought as she made to rush him before he could brandish whatever wicked weapon he had to supplement his taijutsu. There's no way someone that can only use taijutsu would only try to fight like that against a swordsman. She however stopped mid-stride and face planted in the dirt once she saw that Lee had not picked up a weapon. He had grabbed a notepad from inside his suit and was steadily flipping through it. Now what did Tenten's advice say on beating sword users or any kind of specialized weapon? You've got to be fucking kidding me. Karui shouted, sitting up on her knees from her faceplant. Who does things like this? Tenten banged her head hard on the metal railing in the competitor's observation area. Luckily she was wearing her headband and the metal plate on the cloth kept her from hurting herself before she even got to fight. God damn it, Lee, you're in the middle of a fight. Put the notebook up and disarm her, okay? She yelled at the top of her lungs, getting Neji and many of the other nearby Konoha genin to cringe at the volume of the perturbed girl's voice. Now hurry up already. Asa. Lee dropped his notepad back into his jumpsuit and snapped to an involuntary salute, and before Karui could hop back to her feet from her knees, Lee was already on her. She let off a vertical rising slash as a defensive measure, but Lee spun to her injured side and sent out a hard kick that she had to relinquish the grip on her weapon to block. Even then she had to bite back a groan of pain as it still hurt. A shine came to Lee's eye as with a stiff back fist right to the sensitive inside of the wrist that was still holding onto the sword forced Karui's grip to slacken and she dropped the sword. With another wide sweep of the taijutsu specialist's leg, he sent the sword sprawling off into the nearby stream, cutting through the very middle of the field. Satisfied that he had broken the back of her offensive capabilities, Lee looked down at her and spoke, "There, I have disarmed you, Karui-san. Please surrender and get yourself some medical treatment. Unfortunately for Lee, his chivalry was seen by Karui as him thinking she was weak. Thus surrender was currently the furthest thing away from her mind at the moment, as she quickly sprang to her feet in front of Lee with a look of anger in her eyes as she already had her right arm held straight out and drawn far back. Rariato, lariat. She stepped forward hard and hit Lee with the mass of her entire arm right across his collar area, dropping him to the ground head over heels with enough rotation for him to land face first. After making contact, Karui collapsed to the ground holding the arm used in the attack in her entire right side in pain. Son of a bitch, that just made everything so much worse. She managed to stop writhing in pain to get back to her knees to look at Lee. At least I knocked that bastard out. How the hell are you still standing after that? She snapped once Lee was standing back up, looking no worse for wear other than the dirt and sand covering his face and clothes, and the slight stumble when he got to his feet. That was. Lee said to himself lowly before suddenly grinning, such a powerful physical attack. Lee said happily, I can only imagine what it could have done if you weren't injured. Karui looked utterly stunned but grit her teeth and stood back up, ready to fight again until a hand set itself on her shoulder and stopped her. Wadash? Samui-chan, what is it? Samui gave her usual casual look to her fellow Kumo Kunoichi and shook her head frowning. It's not worth it, Karui. You can't defeat him with just taijutsu without your sword. Don't get injured any more than you already are. That last attack was your best move without your sword, and look at him. Lee was simply standing there, staring curiously at the hold-up. I know how to defeat him, so I'll fight him in Omoi and I will help advance. You just rest and get medical treatment. Karui looked saddened at being forced to quit, but Samui had a point, and as loath as she was to admit it, she had a damn good one. With one good half of her body to use, she wouldn't be dealing any damage to Lee, she'd just get hurt worse and ruin their chances next round if they were to even advance. Due to teammate stoppage, Karui is eliminated. Jay said before pointing to Lee, Rock Lee wins match 1. The crowd cheered for Lee, who began to run around and wave to the people. 2 minutes until the second battle begins. Lee looked over at the stands where his teammates were and pointed down, indicating a question of staying out there. Tenten nodded and looked at Neji, who had a scowl on his face. She frowned and nudged him with her elbow, getting a nod out of Neji as well. Meanwhile, Samui was helping to escort Karui over to a Medicnin team to get her off of the field. After doing so, Samui took her time in walking back towards the neutral area where Lee was standing and waiting patiently. In the booth with his peers, aside to himself, Karui, too hot-headed. You knew you were hurt. You could have used your left arm and left side to deliver the move instead of your injured dominant side, but you lost your cool. Bad judgment, girl. He had some positivity though. Samui won't lose the next fight though. She's intelligent enough to have gotten more than enough information to win than she needed. Oh Lee, you made me so proud. Guy shouted, much to the chagrin of the other spectators. Burn on Lee. Your springtime of youth is just beginning. Kurenai, Asuma, and Kakashi were nearby and were all trying to make it seem as if they weren't with him, and failing though due to the fact that they all had on Konoha headbands signifying that they most certainly did. Jay had switched out with Sekka to ref the next match, Fight 2, Rock Lee of Konoha vs. Samui of Kumo. Begin. He then leapt away to allow them room to begin. Samui didn't directly engage Lee with her tanto. She didn't even attack him. She already knew that he would be faster than her, not even taking into account her sizable for her age bust, and she didn't feel like seeing if they could double as Seiyushians to absorb a taijutsu beatdown. Lee was immediately in hot pursuit, especially once he saw that Samui wasn't as fast as Karui was. Before he got close enough to begin attacking, Samui tossed a set of shuriken at Lee that he managed to dance around in avoidance. Stopping on her back foot while Lee was weaving through her metal stars, Samui spun around to deliver a high-spinning back kick once she had estimated where Lee would be in front of her once he finished dodging shuriken. A wide-eyed Lee managed to get an arm up to block and even managed to react accordingly when Samui spun forward to react with another kick. Another block resulted in Lee looking up to make eye contact with Samui, and to his surprise she had been making hand seals. She uses her legs to keep attention in taijutsu combat so that she has her hands free for forming seals. Buken no Seishinbu, Tyrant's Psychosis, ... Samui said before jumping back and getting her distance from Lee to make sure her stratagem would work. Let's see you even touch me now. Lee more or less started shadow boxing / kicking / fighting with nothing but air, seemingly enjoying himself. Samui calmly watched him before speaking up. Please call the fight, Proctor. She asked, do I need to prove that I could kill him, or is this enough? As Sekka took her words to heart, he looked at Lee, who looked more serious now, and every now and again his body would jerk as if he were taking damage. Eventually his body jerking violently was all that occurred. He fell to the ground as if he were knocked there, and Samui drew a fistful of smaller than average kunai, holding them at the ready. He won't be able to defend himself from this if I throw these. Up in the competitor's box, Neji stared at Samui with a hard look in his eyes. Get Lee out of there, he's done. He could feel Tenten turn to him questioningly. She caught him in a genjutsu and neither of us are down there to help him out of it. Tenten nodded and drew a kunai that she threw, landing at Lee's feet as he had gotten back up to continue taking his fake beating. Seka took that as teammate intervention for Lee's safety and called the fight. By way of teammate stoppage, the winner of the fight is Samui. In response to his call of her as the winner, Samui made the ram seal and muttered, "Genjutsu Kai," to release the technique, leaving an exhausted-looking Lee to drop to the ground in a heap. Samui just sighed and stood with one hand on her hip as she waited for her next opponent. He was just as bad at genjutsu as he said he was, though I don't know why he openly admitted such. No talent indeed, I guess. Neji shook his head as he walked down from his position in the viewing balcony. Lee cannot break effectively used genjutsu due to his lack of natural talent in chakra manipulation. It was simply his fate to run into an opponent that could take advantage of this. Just like it's my fate right now to face the only team of Kumo Ninja to make it to the finals. Tenten stared at Neji's form as he disappeared down the stairs to head to the tunnel and let out a sigh. He didn't even discuss which one of them were to go next. Come on Neji, don't lose your head here. It's a test. Don't let your gripe with Kumo mess this up. His fate. Tenten turned her head to Naruto, who was standing with Team 10. He was leaning on the railing and looking down at the arena as Lee stood up on his own power and shrugged off medical attention to come up to the viewing area. I'm so sick of him talking about that crap. It's the only thing I've ever heard him say out loud since we met. Lee was just unlucky, and you guys just wound up drawing these guys in the first round. He said, gesturing his head to Omoi, who was just out of earshot, watching the field intently in preparation for his turn just in case. It's complicated. Tenten said lamely, it's a long story and it isn't my business to tell it. It's personal to Neji. Konohagaku no Sato, Exhibition Stadium. The massive screen set up for long-range viewing of the event had the camera fixed firmly on Neji as he entered the arena through the tunnel. Hanabi had more or less been sitting on her hands watching the fights until Neji's face popped up signifying that he was next up. Why does he look so mad? Hanabi asked no one in particular. Though it would be hard to tell if a Hyuga was angry unless they were extremely upset, even a Hyuga as young as Hanabi could tell if one of their ilk was met by the subtle nuances in their gait or face. This could be bad. Hanabi looked up at her father Hayashi, who was seated right next to her. He still hasn't let go of his anger and hate after all of these years. This could be an issue for him today. Hanabi blinked at Hayashi. Why? I thought Neji was supposed to be the strongest of our generation. That was what she had constantly been told when he was training her. It was also what she had seen when Neji took to sparring with other branch house members. He is. Hayashi admitted to his daughter as the camera showed Neji facing off against Samui. His bloodline runs stronger than your sister's, even yours. He could surpass all of the other members of the clan one day, myself included, at the rate his skill improves. But his hatred of the main house will stunt his growth, as will his fatalistic belief in fate. Hanabi was rather surprised by that. She didn't know Neji hated them. She had never really had a conversation with him though, because he was so much older. Wasn't he her cousin? Why would he hate her or the main house? Maybe the clan's Juinjutsu? But all she knew was that it was meant to protect the bloodline and was placed on branch house members of the clan. Tetsu no Kuni, Chunin Exams Arena. Genma stood between Samui and Neji as the young Hyuga seemed to be staring a hole through Samui, who just looked back impassively. Are you both ready? He got a pair of nods as his response. Fight 3, Neji Hyuga of Konoha vs. Samui of Kumo. Begin. He then jumped out of the way, even though neither of them immediately moved to fight. Samui's even gaze gave way to a shifting of her lips before she spoke. You seem to have a problem with me despite the fact we've never met before. It's not just because I'm an opponent either. I would like to say that the matter isn't personal, but I'd be lying to you if I did. Neji said smoothly as he moved into his family taijutsu stance. Since the ones truly responsible for your village's crimes are out of my reach, I'm afraid that you and your remaining teammate will have to do. Samui rolled her eyes at Neji's declaration, a nameless revenge kick. That's really not cool, you know. What did I ever do to you? You know, besides getting ready to defeat you and everything. Like I said. Neji said as his Byakugan activated, I can't reach the ones I truly have issue with from your village for one reason or another, so I'll make the best with you. I hope you don't believe that you'll defeat me as easily as Lee. Your genjutsu won't work on these eyes. I know. Samui said, drawing her tanto and holding it forward and at the ready. I'm sure you do. Neji said, a spiteful tone hidden somewhere in the sentence as his eyes narrowed on Samui. Attacking a Hyuga head-on was suicide, and anyone with any world knowledge would say the same, thus even with the Tonto, Samui was rather hesitant to attack, instead choosing to drop back and get her distance from Neji, who was in hot pursuit from the start. Samui ran towards the stone bridge spanning the stream and dodged an attempted palm strike from Neji by jumping onto the stone ledge railing, forcing him to jump up there as well to give chase. Samui then jumped off of the bridge towards the stream below and threw a handful of shuriken at Neji as she anticipated him trying to follow her. The Neji that had attempted to jump down after her proved to be a regular bunshin as the weapons passed right through him. The real one jumped down moments later and both Neji and Samui landed on the surface of the water, staying above the surface by way of water walking. No place to run, Neji said as he moved towards her to attack. At least not yet, Samui said quickly, more to herself than to him as Neji closed in on her. Just as he got within range to begin hitting her with strikes, Samui lashed out with her Tonto to keep him back. It was short enough to make some people believe it would be easier to get close and directly engage her, however it was long enough to make them realize what a fatal mistake that really was, usually too late for anyone to learn from though. Neji backed away after Samui's surprisingly swift swipe at his head with her Tonto. I'm surprised. I figured you would have had a supplementary mission from your Kage to harvest my eyes while I'm still alive in this battle. Or maybe you're hoping for a match against my cousin in the hopes of more leeway and chances to do so. I would assume your leaders have learned from their last mistake to assure that they have the actual Hyuga they're looking for the next time around. Harvest your eyes, Samui said, managing to sound rather disgusted with the thought of having to take eyes from a body, either living or dead. That's just very uncool. You're a strange person. You certainly like to talk about what you think my superiors think about your clan. Neji gave her a bitter smile in response. It's not very hard when your father's life and body is handed over to them on a silver platter to appease them. There was simply no need for it. Your Raikage's attempt at treachery and subterfuge failed and he simply couldn't take it. His ego would have had him risk war simply to assure he got one over on Konoha, and to make sure he truly obtained the secrets of the Byakugan. Too bad he failed in that respect as well. I suppose that makes my father some kind of hero or martyr. He then looked down in anger, but a fate like that for him, all it makes him is destiny's victim. How easily it could have been his older brother who was truly the target sought after by your village instead. In the area set aside for the visiting Kage, ground his teeth at the reminder of the incident 9 years past and the failed attempt to bolster Kumo's power. Hiruzen simply stared down into the arena at Neji unflinching, though he couldn't help but feel something for the boy, Hisashi's son. This is what you've been led to believe after all of these years. One so young shouldn't ever feel hatred like this, it can twist you into something ugly. He honestly couldn't expect him to let it go either though. How could he have? He had no closure whatsoever. It seems you have your reasons for hating Kumo, Samui said after lending an ear to Neji's short explanation. I won't sit here and tell you not to, but I'm not exactly going to let you vent on me either. I wouldn't expect you to. Neji admitted freely, however, one can fight their fate all they like, it still won't change a thing in the end. Neji moved forward to attack Samui again as she did so as well. Samui attempted to outright stab Neji, but he simply guided her weapon and her arm past him without being touched. Samui let out a quiet growl at being parried so smoothly and halted herself to deliver a back sweep to Neji's legs, a sweep he cleanly jumped over before spinning in the air and delivering a kick that sent her sliding across the surface of the water before submerging. She didn't immediately resurface, hence Neji simply stood patiently and waited her out. You won't be able to hide from my eyes down there, he said as if she could actually hear him. And he was right. He could see her. He could clearly see her making hand seals, and he didn't particularly want to find out what they were for, thus he quickly got himself out of the moat-like stream. It was a good thing he did too, because a moment later the entire surface of the water crackled with electricity. I should have known a Kumo ninja would have a technique like that. Samui emerged from the stream and back on solid land, dripping wet from having been underwater, yet she didn't even make to wipe the water from her face. That was very fast reaction time to escape Raiten. Yakuatsu no Huden, lightning release, oppressive discharge. But then I guess you could see my hands and didn't feel like leaving it to chance. She almost trapped me? Neji thought to himself. I was too overzealous and followed her down into the stream area without thinking through the possibility of an elemental attack. He almost let out a sigh. Well, this round is a bust for me as far as I'm concerned. I played directly into her hands. I've been going about this the wrong way. This is an exam, not an opportunity to project my anger at your village's older brood onto you. Neji said, surprising Samui and Genma with his admittance to such. The best way to get your village back at the moment for their crimes would be to just crush your team and eliminate you from contention. That was more like it. Anticipating a charge, Samui threw a set of shuriken at Neji to try to manipulate his movement pattern, but Neji dodged in an unexpected manner. Neji jumped between the shuriken and twisted his body in a way that the rotation kept him from being hit. When he landed, he was free and clear to approach her from any angle he wished, which he immediately did without delay. There was no wasted motion in his evasion, unlike her throw which was overextended. A downward slash of reaction from Samui saw Neji seemingly poke her in the wrist with 2 fingers, stopping the swing in its tracks. He finally got through my guard. She thought in a near panic. From the look on his face he wasn't intending to let her escape it again. Before she could even respond she violently coughed up blood without warning, splattering some on Neji's unflinching face. Looking down, Samui saw that in addition to using one hand to stop her attack, Neji had used his other hand to jab 2 fingers directly into her stomach. With his abilities, the internal damage inflicted was palpable. Looking back up at her arm and wondering why she could no longer feel it, Samui looked up and saw a straight trail of small red dots trailing the back of her arm all the way to her wrist where Neji had apparently stopped the attack. You lose. Neji whispered to her before jabbing his fingers deeper into her stomach, attacking further with his jukin and causing more internal damage than previously. Samui dropped to the ground, her weapon dropping from her hand before she fell. Neji turned and walked away before Genma even called the fight as the medics were already rushing in beforehand. The winner of Match 3, Neji Hyuga. Konohagaku no Sato, Exhibition Arena. Neji stayed out for the next bout with Omoi, and even with the boy's longer weapon reach to use to keep Neji at a distance it didn't do much good. It was fast, and the only solace a Kumo supporter could take from it was that at least Neji left Omoi in better condition than he did Samui. As the fight was called and a cheer went up through the arena in Konoha at seeing one of their teams advance first, Hayashi frowned deeply at the smirk on Neji's face that the camera captured as he momentarily took in the cheers in the exam stadium before heading back to the observation area. So much talent, and yet all of that potential may never truly be achieved. Hanabi could only look between her father and the screen that was depicting Neji's victory. He had all of that anger towards the main house and Kumo for his father's death, but she was still missing something. Wasn't it the branch family's inherent duty to protect the secrets of the clan? Before she could get too much further into thought on the matter, the screen showed a graphic of who would be fighting next according to the tournament brackets and her face lit up. Yes. It's on Asuma's turn. Once her father turned to look at her strangely due to the outburst, she shrank back demurely as if it never happened. Tetsu no Kuni, Chunin Exams Arena. Neji had made his way back up to the viewing area without a word and stood calmly next to Tenten and Lee, but not before sparing a glance at the other competitors. His eyes made it to Team 8 and stopped on Hinata. He seemed to be staring a hole into her, managing to intimidate the timorous girl before Kiba and Shino stepped in front of her, the former growling warningly at Neji. Instead of further exacerbating the situation, Neji's eyes simply turned back down to the field. Kiba still kept a glare on Neji before turning around to Hinata. It's alright. Don't worry about that prick. Let him try and do anything to you, he'll be in for a nasty surprise. Akamaru barked from the front of Kiba's jacket supportively. Hinata nodded, albeit reluctantly. Kiba frowned before turning to look at Shino. There was an unspoken agreement between them, that there wasn't any way in hell that Neji was going to get to Hinata over his stupid grudge as long as they were around. On the field. Team 10 and the Iwa team had already gone down onto the field for their match. They had the rest of the round to worry about Team Guy, for now they had their own opponents to deal with. For the face-off prior to the coin flip, the malintent from the Iwa side of things was obvious enough that all 3 of the proctors stood present to ensure no premature fireworks, heads or tails. Jay asked the Iwa team. Tails. Hisashi said, not dropping his killing intent that clearly wasn't working on Team 10. If anything, it just made them all look more determined than before. Jay flipped the coin and looked down once it hit the ground. Heads. He pointed at Team 10, pick the matchup. One-on-one or team battle? Team battle. Shikamaru said without hesitation or a moment needed to even think about it. All three proctors nodded, knowing that all three of them would be needed on the field to keep track of what was going on and to keep some semblance of order here. Jay projected his voice over the arena so that he could clearly be heard. First round match, one team battle only. Nara Shikamaru, Yamanaka Ino, and Uzumaki Naruto of Konoha vs. Hisashi, Misaru, and Jun of Iwa. Any last words, Runt? Hisashi asked cruelly, though he didn't specify who it was directed at. He was clearly speaking to Naruto. I'll say them when I actually fight someone I think can kill me. Naruto said, getting annoyed with this guy's attitude. What's your problem? It's my business. Hisashi said lowly, maybe I just don't like your face. Maybe just looking at you pisses me off and reminds me of someone that knocked my clan from grace. Did you ever think of that? Hisashi's sensei had reported to the Chuchikage that during the month of training Hisashi had kicked himself and his entire team into gear, forcing them to train harder than they had in quite some time. They had been entered due to their ages and tenure as genin, not due to their inherent talent. They were more or less expected to underachieve, and Oniki was actually quite pleased when word came that they had advanced to the finals. It meant that Iwagakure hadn't washed out of the exams and they had representatives for the finals. It also gave him an excuse for a vacation of sorts. The underachiever tag apparently died with a vengeance though once they came back to prepare for the tournament. Hisashi seemed driven, and wasn't going to let himself hold back any chance at victory. Neither his sensei, nor the Chuchikage could understand why he seemed to be this way. He didn't like Konoha at all, but that was common, especially since Hisashi had been old enough to get some of the backlash from the end of the last war, being 17 years old. But then Oniki saw Team 10 walk out onto the field and got a look at Naruto when the large screen hanging from the ceiling showed a close-up shot of Naruto's face, and he then proceeded to turn robotically towards Hiruzen, because he understood why Hisashi had been so focused. And you were going to hide the fact that he had a son for how long, Sarutobi? Oniki said, amused, it won't matter though. While the lot of us have a bone to pick with him of sorts, Hisashi's got the biggest one out of all of us. Hiruzen knew that Oniki was referring to Naruto's parentage, but was keeping it quiet for whatever reason. The Kazekage and Raikage didn't seem to notice the gist of the conversation, or care about the bantering between the old fossils of the 5 great shinobi villages. Either way, it didn't matter. How so, Oniki? Hisashi's clan, they were slated as Iwagakure's protectors. Oniki explained, the Mamurai clan, they ensured that Iwagakure stayed pristine and unconquered throughout all of the wars and conflicts our village endured since its inception. Until your predecessor/successor made up that little jutsu that gave him his epithet, and he made a mockery of the Mamurai. Kekai, barrier, ninjutsu can't do much good when one can teleport in and out of the village at will as long as one of his little knives or formula tags were hidden somewhere. Hiruzen nodded in understanding. He knew of this clan. Of course he did. He was the professor, for Kami's sake. Then why does he not go by his given surname? They were vilified after the end of the war by the villagers and even their own comrades. The entire defense of the village was centered around their unique skills. Most of them saw a drop in their practical skills, some went into depression, became alcoholics. The fallout was terrible for them. Oniki said with a deep frown on his face, even so. Hisashi was treated horribly by the children in the academy, usually by the direction of their parents. So much so that the moment he was able to, he dropped his clan name. He would rather have no name than a bad one. He turned towards Hiruzen and shook his head. Your little yellow clone down there could be in some major trouble. Even if he inherited a smidge of his father's skill, he doesn't possess his techniques. In another private area elsewhere, Gato held a glass filled with wine up to his lips as he grinned evilly prior to taking a sip. Goodbye Konoha brats, and good riddance. Naruto growled angrily at the older genin, what does any of that have to do with me? Hisashi snarled in return, the same thing it has to do with me. He turned to Jay, start the fight so I can kill this kid already. Jay frowned at Hisashi's attitude and looked between the two teams, the jawing now done, are you both ready? Team 10 and the Iwa team both nodded, looking ready to move, begin. As soon as the words left Jei's mouth, all three proctors vacated the area around the teams. Shikamaru and Ino took a position slightly behind Naruto while Jun and Misaru moved to both sides of them in an attempt to pincer them in. Hisashi threw a handful of shuriken at the team, but Naruto blocked them with the flat of his quickly drawn machete. From the sides while Naruto had been busy neutralizing the projectiles, Shikamaru returned fire in a manner of speaking as he threw a kunai at Jun. The attack of Jun stopped so that he could make sure he dodged the attack from Shikamaru, thus the pincer attack collapsed and Team 10 slipped out the back door to get their distance back. Damn it, they're moving for the wooded area. Jun yelled once he saw them backing off towards the forested side of the field. Hisashi, stop em. I've got it, stupid. Hisashi yelled as he had been moving towards that side of the field since the fight had started and he had used his shuriken to get their attention. At that rate he would beat them to that section, but Hisashi's desire was not to give the field advantage to Team 10, especially by himself without his own team there to back him up. Lifting his arms up, Hisashi took aim with them straight out, as underneath his brown poncho that covered his whole body the shaved head genin revealed a device attached to his arms that seemed to fire a pair of long, hollow rods across the entire field, sticking high into the walls at the very ends. After firing the rods he quickly rolled through hand seals before lifting his hand to fire one more rod directly at Team 10, catch this brats. Shikamaru turned his head and saw Hisashi fire the rod directly at them, that's too fast to block or catch. Scatter! He yelled, getting Ino and Naruto to do just that to force the shot to miss them, stopping them short of reaching the forest. Ino attempted to return the favor with a handful of senbon, but Hisashi dodged them. After avoiding Ino's attack, Hisashi made his real move, Kekai, Fuchsia Jakabe, Barrier, Wonder Wall. Hisashi pressed his hands together and the rods that had stuck themselves in certain places let out a momentary glow before from the ground rose a massive wall the length of the field and the height of the walls surrounding the edge of the arena. What the hell? Ino said as the wall blocked them off. Okay, we can still work with this. Shikamaru thought, as long as we stay off of the rocky side then they don't have the field advantage even if we don't either. Too slow, you bunch of babies. Jun shouted as he stood by the wall and made 3 hand seals before delivering a punch to it. Doton, Iwa Hayado Kyuzushi, Earth Release, Rock Lodging Destruction. From the top of the wall, large pieces began to crumble off and fall down towards Team 10. All 3 of them quickly moved away from the wall and tried to move back towards the stream, intent on crossing it back towards the Zen Garden to get their backs off of the wall and to avoid the falling rocks. Once they tried to do so, however, the third member of the Iwa team, Misaru, got in their way, holding a pair of curved kunai. Naruto took the lead with his machete and clashed blades with him before stepping through and overpowering him with a hard front kick that sent him flying backwards. Gah! How does a kid 5 years younger than me and at least 6 inches shorter hit like that? Misaru thought as he went sailing. As they ran across the bridge, Shikamaru tapped Naruto on his shoulder and made a hand gesture that Naruto nodded in understanding to, a grin on his face. Naruto dropped back and slapped explosive tags directly over their path, armed to go off once something else came into their proximity. The team then disappeared around the corner pillar of the bridge and ran into the Zen Garden, taking cover behind the large rocks strewn through it. Jun was the first of the team to reach the bridge and saw the explosive tags lining it. Ha, do you really think we need a bridge to cross? He said tauntingly before running along the side of the stream in order to jump it. Hisashi and Misaru arrived to the stream in time to see Jun begin to jump over the stream. No, you idiot! Stop running ahead! Hisashi shouted, but Jun had already taken off into the air. Jun heard his teammate yell, but it was too late to turn back then. He just had to stay put until they got over there too. That was easy enough. And then he looked down at his landing spot and saw a very long shadow stretching out from the side of the bridge pillar. What the dash? As he touched the ground he found himself unable to move because of the shadow that was attached to his. Before he could even say anything about it, 2 needles hit him in the side of the neck, making him incredibly drowsy. Fuck. He then fell directly backwards into the stream as he floated on the surface of the water. Kagemon no Jutsu, Shadow Possession Jutsu, complete. Good shot, Ino. Shikamaru said from his and Ino's position hiding behind the pillar at the corner of the bridge. Naruto had instantly created 2 clones and hung them into Shikamaru and Ino as decoys while the real ones hid just out of sight but able to launch an ambush on anyone trying to cross the stream. you got him before anyone even realized that I caught him. Did you kill him? Nope, he's just asleep. Ino said, holding more senbon in her hands at the ready. I hit him in the neck though, that's why it worked so fast. Anywhere else and he could have fought it. Jun is unable to continue, he is eliminated. Seki said as he jumped down into the stream to check him over. Misaru palmed his face at the proclamation of the announcement and the roar of the crowd, you dumbass. He muttered as he and Hisashi stopped at the edge of the stream to stare across it. Ino and Shikamaru were still hidden, and Naruto was still in the Zen garden somewhere, so now what? I don't think they're dumb enough to let you set up another barrier jutsu anywhere near them. From Hisashi's arm attachments 2 more rods emerged into his hands that he twirled in a testing manner before throwing one across the bridge. Once it landed, Ino and Shikamaru moved as far away from it into the Zen garden as they could, knowing what the first rods had done. On the other side, Hisashi struck the ground with his second remaining rod as a small rippling trail of chakra began to cross the bridge. The ripple of chakra triggered the explosive tags, forcing them to explode without harming any of the remaining Iwa genin. The bridge now clear and with Ino and Shikamaru in full retreat mode, Hisashi and Misaru ran across the bridge to follow up. When they did so however, by the time they made it to the middle of the bridge dozens of Naruto clones jumped up from the sides of the bridge from beneath the water prepared to attack. Holy shit! Misaru said as the clones got closer. He had a kunai at the ready to fight off as many as he could, but Hisashi was faster and more prepared for this situation. The evidence came when Hisashi stabbed his rod into the ground and grabbed 2 more to surround himself and Misaru in a triangle formation, Raiten, Gyaku Kaminari Shibari, Lightning Release, Reverse Thunder Binding. A triangle of translucent blue energy formed between the rods just as Naruto's clones crashed into the see-through wall instead of converging on the remaining Iwa ninja. As the first wave of clones hit the barrier they were dispelled in a ripple of electricity that ran through the lot of them by way of conducting contact. As the smoke from the clones dissipated into the air, Hisashi let out a laugh, you don't have his skill after all. You don't fight anything like people say that bastard did. You can't get through any of my kekai to get to me. At the end of the bridge he saw Naruto, Ino, and Shikamaru all standing together. Naruto brandished his machete once more and prepared to charge the barrier to try and hack his way through it before Shikamaru grabbed Naruto and held him back. What do you think you're about to do? Shikamaru whispered. A befuddled look came over Naruto, I'm going to cut through the barrier. It can't be that tough, could it? It's lightning based, I'll just flow wind chakra through the machete and cut it. You won't get close. Shikamaru said quietly, your clones couldn't even touch the barrier without getting shocked. You'd have to use your new jutsu if you want your wind to break through that thing without shocking yourself, and I don't want to use out new moves until we have to. He looked at Hisashi and Misaru and they didn't look like they were willing to come out anytime soon, good thing we don't have a time limit. Ino started impatiently tapping her foot on the ground, well what are we going to do, sit here? Come on, the longer they're in there the more time they have to think of something that can actually work. Naruto thought for a moment before blinking and moving to whisper an idea to Ino and Shikamaru. Ino looked at him strangely, are you sure? Do you really think you can aim it that well? Naruto whispered to her again, okay, if you're that sure it won't matter. Shikamaru had also heard the intended course of action from their Jinchuriki teammate, don't you think that'll put you at a disadvantage once it drops, 3-on-2 or not? Naruto gave him a deadpan stare in response, fine, do it. We'll be ready. Naruto grinned and then looked at Hisashi's barrier. Ino and Shikamaru cleared the way on the bridge for Naruto to have the space needed for whatever he was about to try. Naruto started out at the furthest end of the bridge and started running towards Hisashi and Misaru at a faster and faster pace. Misaru held back a laugh, what's he going to do, run his rock-filled head into the barrier? Even Hisashi let out a laugh at that, he can't touch the barrier himself or he'll fry. In the stands, Asuma's eyes widened and he let out a chuckle as he saw Naruto run towards the barrier, he's really going to try that bullshit attack. That got the attention of Kakashi, Kurenai, and Guy as he continued to laugh louder, I guess if there was ever a time for it, now would be it. What's he going to do? Kurenai asked, he has to know he won't even get close to touching it. The barrier isn't a person that he can flank or catch off guard. Well, his element is wind, and he can use chakra flow on his machete to increase its cutting power. Asuma said with a grin. Kakashi nodded, so he's got the type advantage over the barrier, but he still can't get close enough to hack through it. That got another chuckle out of Asuma. I didn't say he was going to hack through it, but let's just say those walls aren't going to stop this. What the hell is that idiot doing? Sasuke asked as he saw Naruto charging towards the barrier with his weapon drawn. He thought Naruto was smarter than that. He had actually shown Sasuke some talent last time they had it out for a bit. There was no way this was that same Naruto, charging an electrified barrier. Choji had a bag of chips in his possession as he ate while watching the fights. Shikamaru wouldn't let Naruto do this if there wasn't a reason for it. Shikamaru would never have let them do anything out of desperation like that. Sakura frowned as she watched as well. I guess so. Naruto let out a yell as he got close enough to make his move. Expecting a direct rush, Hisashi and Misaru were utterly surprised when Naruto quickly made a full 360-degree turn before hurling his machete at the barrier, spinning like a buzzsaw from the velocity it had been thrown with. Straight from Konoha motherfucker, Dateba yo. Oh no way. Hisashi said just before the wind-coated machete sliced right through the barrier. The space inside, while sturdy and protective, was confined. Even when trying to move to the corners of the barrier, both Misaru and Hisashi were cut deeply by the attack that destroyed the barrier with the force of Naruto's throw and his element cutting through the defense. Blood flew all over from the cuts as Misaru dropped to the ground screaming, his right arm barely attached as it had been cut all the way to the bone. Hisashi stumbled and held his body up against the side of the bridge, a deep wound in his left shoulder making it useless and unable to move. Blood fell freely onto the bridge as his fingers twitched uncontrollably from the nerve damage that he had clearly suffered. Damn it! Hisashi said in a strained voice as he glared hatefully at Naruto, damn it! He shouted, using his good arm to obtain another rod that he used to charge Naruto, prepared to try and club him to death. It's not fair. Naruto was set to defend himself and end the fight when Shikamaru's shadow stopped Hisashi in his tracks and 5 senbon hit him in the chest in rapid succession. It's not fair. His pupils dilated and Shikamaru released him from his shadow, letting him drop to the ground in a heap. A sigh came from Shikamaru as he stood up from his crouch and released his rat seal. Will someone call this thing already before they both bleed to death out here? The winners of the match and advancing to the next round, Nara Shikamaru, Yamanaka Ino, and Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto looked at the damage that had just been done and walked over to where his machete landed. A team of earth manipulation specialists got to work on bringing down the massive wall, cutting off a section of the field while Ino waved to the crowd and Shikamaru tried dragging her by her arm back to the tunnel to head up to the viewing area so that they could rest and plan. Picking up the weapon from the ground and wiping the blood on it off in the dirt, Naruto looked up into the stands to make good on a promise and found Tsunade as she stuck out, in particular with Shizune and Taunton. Eventually it was clear that Naruto was making exact eye contact with the two ladies and he grinned widely as if to say, "You were saying?" Directed at Tsunade and Tsunade particularly. Up in the crowd, Shizune looked towards her master slowly to ensure that no sudden movements would end with Tsunade's temper being lost at having her judgment getting shown up by some kid. Tsunade merely looked down at Naruto from her seat with an even look on her face before she held up the stub that marked one of the bets she had made. Well, at least I was right about them getting out of round 1 like I said they would. She said before shrugging, they won't next round though, so it's fine. Konohagakure no Sato, Exhibition Stadium. Yes, Naruto Onishima won. Hanabi shouted excitedly before once again realizing where she was, who she was supposed to be, and who exactly she was with once Hayashi looked at her as if she had grown another head. She once again went back to being quiet and trying to pretend that she didn't have a random, at least as far as her father was concerned, outburst. She did however have a victorious smile on her face. Konobaka thinks he's Onisama's number 2. Well, wouldn't a good number 2 have been here to see him win his fight? Too bad the academy was holding class that day. Kano Amuro would later curse the ammunition given to Hanabi once the war over who was Naruto's rightful apprentice heated up. If he had been there that day he might have been able to nip the argument in the bud soon thereafter. It was not to be however. But next round Naruto's team was to fight Neji's team. That thought gave Hanabi pause. Neji was her cousin and clan member. She'd first met Naruto all of 6 days ago, and while he was infinitely cooler than Neji due to the fact that they had actually interacted in a positive manner, family was family, but then why did her family appear to grievously dislike the rest of them then? Higher up in the stadium, also viewing the feed from Tetsu no Kuni on the screen, another person was having thoughts of the spiky-haired blonde waving to the crowd, a crowd that seemed to openly be cheering for him. That must have been weird for him. Jiraiya stood against the wall of the VIP box as two of Konoha's elders, his sensei's old teammates, sat there watching the tournament in quiet contemplation. That was decent litmus test, kid. Jiraiya thought to himself about the first round win. Next round it's time to really see what you've got. Tetsu no Kuni, Chunin Exams Arena, competitor's box. He threw his own weapon. Tamari said to herself, shaking her head with a scowl on her face as Team 10 walked back into the box, talking amongst themselves, what an idiot. He disarmed himself on a random gambit that wouldn't have worked if that guy had been smart enough to deactivate his barrier. In her mind, if he had tried that on her, she would have cut him to pieces. She would never relinquish her fan for such an absurd purpose. Kankuro let out a laugh at how his sister seemed to be offended by Naruto's use of his weapon, especially since he used her own element in a flagrantly questionable way. If it's stupid and it works, then it's not stupid to marry. Blame the other team for it if you have to. He then noticed Gaara staring at Naruto intently. Gaara? Is something the matter? Gaara didn't blink or take his eyes off of Naruto as he remembered the run-in with Naruto's clones in the tunnels of the mountains 1 month ago. He got away. Gaara said coldly, he pissed me off, and I didn't kill him. Both Tamari and Kankuro looked at each other with a nervous hint in their eyes. Gaara was either going to blow their chances of getting promoted by going out of his way to kill Naruto outside of the field, or he wasn't going to get to vent his aggression on the boy that had brazenly attacked him with his army of clones, and this would mean that it would build up until Gaara killed a sufficient amount of others, hopefully not them, to calm himself, because there was no way that particular team would make it to the finals. All they seemed really good at was running away. And they didn't know just how many lives it would take to calm Gaara if it was to come to that, because Gaara had never fought anyone that he didn't flat out kill before. No one got away from Gaara. It didn't look like Uzumaki Naruto would either. Whether it happened on the battlefield or elsewhere, Gaara would get what he apparently wanted, Naruto's life. On the field. The time for the next match had come as Team 8 had already gone down to stand at the ready. Shino had been as stoic as ever, while Hinata seemed a little fidgety in front of the audience. She did however smile and wave to the people, all the while Kiba was soaking the whole thing up as if he had already won the round. The team from Taki, on the other hand, entered in a completely different manner. The girl with the mint green hair and the orange eyes that wore white, seemed to have a permanent scowl on her face as she looked around at the crowd on her walk out. Dorobu, the young man with spiky black hair, the battered black cloak, and the strange green and red eyes, seemed to lead the way, directing the girl and keeping her from stopping to scowl. Bringing up the rear of the team was the young man with the puffy brown hair and the black jacket, Mr. Average himself, Hooky, and he seemed perked up just to be there. As the Taki team made it out to face off with Team 8, before Genma could even open his mouth to address either team, Dorobu opened his mouth and spoke succinctly, heads. Genma paused for a moment. He was indeed about to ask them which side of the coin they wanted, but the cheeky punk could have waited 3 seconds for him to ask, couldn't he have? Regardless of that, he flipped the coin and it landed heads. Pick your poison then. Team battle. So we can get this over with in a hurry. Dorobu said again before turning to his teammates, unless you all have a problem with that. Hooky shook his head rapidly in the negative with a fearful look on his face, while Fu just gave Dorobu a harsh look. I couldn't care less. Maybe in a team battle I'll get lucky and you and the albatross here will die, so I don't have to do this anymore. She said dismissively. Even if Hooky goes and gets himself killed, you'll still be stuck with me, my love. And we'll still be going through with this tournament. You aren't going to duck the chance to raise your and my ranks this time like the last 5 times by letting a teammate die. Dorobu said tauntingly, managing to get a gulp of fear from Hooky at the thought of being allowed to die just so Fu didn't have to compete any longer. I'm your soulmate, remember? The one tasked with guiding you ever since we were in the academy. You mean my handler? Fu said lowly with quite a bit of spite in her voice, but I guess he's right. Since we didn't run into anyone to kill the bastard during the survival test this time, it's too late to duck out, especially since Taki can see what I'm doing in this arena. All a matter of perspective, my dear. Dorobu said evenly. On the other side, Kiba paid attention to every word being said and loved what he was hearing. So they aren't even a really experienced team? That girl and that guy had teammates die on them 5 times so that they never made it this far before. Their teamwork is going to be so shoddy. He grinned wolfishly and turned to Genma. What say we get this show on the road already? Dorobu raised an eyebrow and smirked. Someone's excited, aren't they? He then decided to ask a quick question. You wouldn't mind telling me of your natural elemental affinities, would you? It's a bit of a hobby of mine to compare them to others. I'm afraid we can't do that, Shino said, taking his hands out of his pockets and setting himself in a ready stance. Why? Because it would bear no advantage to us, nor does it particularly matter at the moment. Fair enough, Dorobu said before turning to Fu. Shall we take care of this together, my beloved? Fu turned away and walked from Dorobu and Hooky. Do whatever you want. Just because I have to be here doesn't mean I have to do anything. The jaw of Hooky dropped as he saw Fu walk away from the Zen Garden starting point into the barren portion of the field to simply stand away, not concerned at all with the battle. What? Fu, where are you going? She didn't answer, flipping him off before merely standing in a position of observation and scrutiny of the fight. Genma turned to her, and when she didn't come back over, she turned to Dorobu. So she isn't going to fight. There weren't really any rules saying that battles had to start in a single area, it was just unspoken that they would begin in the Zen Garden. But Fu didn't look like she was planning on participating at all. Oh, she's just fussy, Dorobu said, shaking his head with a fond-looking smile on his face. It's sort of difficult to motivate her to fight, but it should still be fine. We're ready. Hooky seemed petrified at starting 3-on-2 but didn't voice this out loud once a glare silenced him. Whatever, Genma said before projecting his voice. First round match, 1 team battle only, Fu, Hooky, and Dorobu vs. Aburame Shino, Inyazuka Kiba, and Hyuga Hinata. Begin. Akamaru immediately jumped out of Kiba's coat, ready to attack as Kiba made a ram seal prior to setting down on the ground on all fours. Shikyaku no Jutsu, 4 legs Jutsu. Kiba's appearance became more feral as his canines and fingernails grew. Small bugs began to leak out of the openings of Shino's clothes. Hinata activated her Byakugan and set herself in her stance. Kiba tossed a pill to Akamaru, who caught and ate it, his fur turning red before he jumped onto Kiba's back. Jujin Bunshin, beast human clone. Akamaru then turned into a perfect body double of Kiba, standing on his back. That's interesting, Dorobu said with feigned enthusiasm. Let me respond to that with this. He formed a hand seal, Iwa Bunshin no Jutsu, rock clone jutsu. 3 wads of earth flew from his mouth and shaped into copies of Dorobu. All 4 Dorobus looked at Hooky and spoke simultaneously. Don't just sit there, fight. Hooky suddenly snapped into action and took aim at Hinata, thinking she would be his best chance at defeating one of Team 8. While he did this, the rock clones sprang into action and attacked Shino and Kiba. Alright, here we go, he said to himself as he drew a kunai and ran towards Hinata. Bunshin no Jutsu, clone jutsu. 5 copies of Hooky charged at Hinata, prepared to attack, yelling a war cry as he did so. Hinata gasped audibly once she saw him coming but merely set herself in her ready stance, prepared for the advance. Shouty eye, palm bottom, she cried as she shot out one palm thrust at the charging Hooky, hitting the real one effortlessly right in the chest while the others merely faded from view. I'm sorry, she said as Hooky's face was twisted in shock at getting hit so easily, but I could see you the whole time. His body completely paralyzed, Hooky could barely squeak out his next words. Oh. Hyuga, duh, he said before falling forward as stiff as a board and laying motionless on the ground. Hooky is unable to continue. He is eliminated. Well, after so easily seeing through Hooky's approach, Hinata thought that it had to be a trick or some sort. She didn't honestly expect him to fall so easily. She expected a counter of some sort, or a dodge, hell, at least a last-second kawarimi. 1 hit though? Oh well, she wasn't one to look a gift horse in the mouth. At least she managed to defeat someone to help her team. With that thought in mind, she looked around the battlefield to look at the remaining 2 Taki ninja and let out a gasp at what she saw. Their bodies were so strange. In the stands, Kurenai almost let out a loud yelling cheer when Hinata put her enemy down. All of her hard work paid off. She didn't do so though because she was usually the one that kept her composure, and if she cheered like a schoolgirl then Asuma and possibly Kakashi would call her on it and pick with her, or Guy would claim her flames of youth were burning bright for her student. Still, she could see the apprehension on Hinata's face after the boy was evacuated from the field. Shouldn't have getting a win made her confidence rise? It seemed like it decreased once she took notice of the advantage they now had. But why? The opportunity was simply too great to not take advantage of. When Doroba began taking on both Kiba and Shino, he neglected to take notice that there had been a third wheel there at first. So after helping Kiba destroy one of the rock clones with their tandem technique, Akamaru immediately took Kiba's place as his body double while the original skulked across the field to get a good vantage point on the last Taki ninja who hadn't thrown a punch yet. They would have to defeat her eventually, and she didn't surrender. She just left the vicinity of the main battle. For all he knew, she was waiting for her teammate to wear them down before stepping in. It took a while, and the transformed Akamaru, along with Shino, had been unable to corner Doroba to double-team him despite Shino sucking the chakra out of the remaining clones with his Kakaichiryu. The Taki ninja seemed to be more about bantering and dodging attacks than trying to find a useful counter. Still, Fia was vulnerable. She didn't even try to register Kiba's presence, and that meant that it was showtime. Kiba broke out into a run on the barren grounds before launching himself at her in a jump, Tsuiga, passing Fang. He began spinning at a frightening speed, looking more akin to a drill than a human being, and he was aimed right at Fia. Fia heard him call out the name of the jutsu and turned towards Kiba with a gasp before crossing her arms in front of her face and body and shutting her eyes in desperation. Kiba slammed into Fia with his drill-like attack. However, instead of overwhelming her with the oppressive taijutsu assault, he was held in place as Fia merely slid back across the ground, grunting with effort to hold him back with nothing more than her body. Eventually she began getting pushed uphill on the mountainous terrain of the barren zone, and that lack of assistance for Kiba allowed her to take one hard step forward with a shove and a yell of exertion. Kiba was knocked from his tsuiga and sent rolling backwards down the hill, ending with him sitting at the bottom of it, dizzy from what had just transpired. How in the hell did she do dash? He stopped asking questions when he saw Fia nearly upon him from a straightforward charge, a look of pure anger on her face. "Leave me alone!" Fia shouted before delivering a driving punt kick to Kiba. Her entire attacking portion of her leg, all the way up from her foot to her knee, connected with Kiba's front, either his chest or his face. Blood flew freely from his clearly broken nose and smashed face as he sailed at a low altitude across the ground before hitting it and rolling bonelessly, clearly unconscious and probably taking more damage from the nasty nature of the backlash from the kick. "Kiba-kun!" Hinata shouted as she rushed over to try and help her broken teammate any way she could. Her eyes allowed her to see all of the broken bones he had taken just from one kick. She was beaten over to Kiba by Seka and a group of medics who were already working on him. Is he going to be alright? Even Akamaru had ceased fighting to run over to his fallen owner. Seka frowned as he had been running a prognostic jutsu on Kiba's person. He was pulverized. "I don't think I've ever seen a genin produce blunt damage like that. He'll be fine if we get him out of here now." The other medics began loading up Kiba on a gurney while Seka stood up to address the situation to the crowd. "Inyazuka, Kiba is eliminated." As they hustled him off of the field, Akamaru trailed after, the battle secondary to the health of his friend. Hinata spared a glance at Fia, who was pacing around rather angrily, almost muttering to herself about that idiot and how he should have just left her alone just like everybody else. The thing she took notice of was the constant flow of chakra moving through Fia's entire body. When Kiba had attacked her, it seemed to flare up and turn her entire body into a scorching blaze of chakra. When she had rushed after Kiba to attack him, the same thing had occurred, only lessened. Whatever that was, Kiba's attack hadn't left a scratch on her. Whatever had just happened had to do with chakra and chakra flow. And that meant that this girl was her responsibility to defeat. Meanwhile, over with Dorobu and Shino, the battle had come to a standstill. Shino hadn't expected the sudden finish that had befallen Kiba, and even though he found the boy a little overbearing at times, he was still his comrade and friend. "I told you that Fia was fussy," Dorobu said, getting Shino's attention as he seemed to be amused by Fia's reactionary actions against Kiba. "She doesn't like to fight, but that doesn't mean that she won't fight. She's far from a pacifist. Fia would much rather prefer her own company to that of others. It even stretches out to the fact that she would lash out at her teammates and sensei at first when she started out as a ninja. I'm the only one she won't attack for certain. Because she is my soulmate. What could you possibly mean by that? Shino asked, his bugs buzzing angrily in respect to his own emotions that he would not overtly show. I have been entrusted with carrying on a special kinjutsu from my village. More infamous than our secret weapon for what it wound up being used for in the past. Doroba said proudly, it would kill a lesser shinobi so only the strongest of prospects can receive it. The Jiangu, Earth Grudge Fear. Fear realizes that this turns me into as much of a weapon as she is. I am just as inhuman as her. And like her my abilities are unnatural. Unnatural? Shino said. All the while they had been talking he had been cutting off possible paths of retreat with his bugs from behind. There was no way he would be able to run without being swarmed with his insects. It was a good thing this person liked to gab so much. I won't tell you about my ability, but you've already seen Fu and would guess it without much help. Fu's marvelous body adjusts itself to necessary situations depending on the amount of motivation or emotion she feels at the time. If she is scared or angry her power is incredible. Tekia Seitai, adaptable body. A gift from her Biju. Shino raised an eyebrow at that, Biju. In the competitor's box, Naruto's eyes widened before he palmed his face, oh no. He sank his head down on the railing and shook it, getting the attention of Shikamaru and Ino who had heard the same, you seriously can't be telling me. Yes. Doroba said, looking over to Fu and blowing a kiss that she merely sneered at him for. Fu is the Jinchuriki key of the Nanabi no Kabuta Mushi, seven-tailed rhinoceros beetle. She contains the beast within her body. Why you? Fu muttered lowly, shaking in anger with tears pricking at her eyes, I didn't want him or anyone here to know that. She shouted throughout the now silent arena, isn't it enough that you and those monkeys in Taki all know? No one here had to know that. I didn't need them looking at me the same way too. At that moment, Fu was angry enough to punch the ground and cause a tremor that disrupted the footing of Hinata who was trying to attack her by surprise. The alarm on unknowingly averting an attack on her person turned to a feeling of anger at the fact that she was attacked again. You didn't get the point when your mud-faced friend attacked me? I said leave me alone. Fu picked up a piece of rubble from at her feet and flicked it at Hinata, hitting her in the forehead as she got back up and knocking her backwards 10 feet with a red bleeding bruise on her forehead. She wasn't done with this little situation however. Shino felt the fear creep into his chest at watching another teammate be hurt by something he had only heard rumblings about of being done in other countries. Fu wasn't even letting her get up, simply kicking and stomping the downed Hinata, call her off. He demanded coldly as his bugs began to creep from their hiding places, moving in slowly and threateningly. Doroba began to laugh at Shino's threat until from under his cloak a mass of thick black threads emerged from his body and boosted him into the air as he jumped himself out of being boxed in by Shino, clearing the space clean over his head. Sorry Abu Rama, but I've always wanted to see if these things could pluck and use more productive organs other than hearts and stuff. Let's start with Hyuga eyes. He shouted maniacally. Shino immediately sprinted as fast as he could after Dorobu, sending out more bugs to try and latch onto him while he was in the air. In response, once Dorobu landed he sent a wave of his threads at Shino in a method of attack. Taking note of his claim of plucking out organs, Shino immediately called a mass of bugs towards him to swarm around his body rapidly in a dome shape, Mushikame no Jutsu, Insect Jar Jutsu, ... The attack was averted, but once the shield dropped Dorobu had reached Fu, who was holding up a very beaten-up Hinata by the collar of her jacket. No. You're so lovely Fu. Doroba said with a smile as he walked the rest of the way over to Fu who merely glared at him, now let's see if I can take those eyes of hers. Fu let out a disgusted scoff that he decided to address, I'd never take anything from your exquisite body Fu, of course. That would be a real crime. Only because I'm still useful. Fu said spitefully, still holding the unconscious Hinata up, and she kept trying to attack me so I had to capture her. I'd never intentionally give you or the village anything you want. Stop. Shino shouted as he could see the threads of Dorobu inching towards Hinata. The grin on the young man's face as he turned around to face Shino let the insect user know that there was only one thing he wanted at this point, she can barely fight anymore. If we surrender would you let her go? Doroba said in mocking contemplation, I do want to see if Jiangu is compatible with taking Hyuga eyes, but then again you're giving me a surrender. If I attack after you've done that, then I'll probably blow my shot at a promotion for not being P.C, so yes. Surrender and we'll let her go. Fine, we surrender. Shino said without hesitation, now release Hinata. Doroba looked over at Jay and Genma as both nodded and Genma gave the announcement, by way of verbal surrender the winners, and advancing to the next round, Fu, Dorobu, and Hookie. The crowd reaction was more along the lines of light applause more than anything due to the revelation of Fu being a Jinchuriki. Said girl released Hinata and let her fall to the ground before walking back towards the waiting area, glaring daggers at the audience as she could make out some of the conversation being made by the spectators, talking about her. Shino, much to his credit, paid neither Taki Ninja any mind as he made his way to Hinata to make sure she was alright. Doroba walked fast enough to catch up to her and Fu turned to glare at him, when this is over and we leave this place. I don't care if you're the only person since Kakuza that can perform the Jiangu. I'm going to tear you apart for this, and the village can do whatever they want with me afterwards if they find out. Keep that anger for the next round, my love. Doroba said, shrugging off Fu's threat even though he was keeping a rather wide berth from her. He only said it to motivate her powers to fight. How she felt was of no consequence to him, she was never in a good mood anyway. If he was close enough to touch her, she might lose the only inhibition she had against outright attacking him, just like anyone else that got within reaching distance of her. Stay away from me. Fu muttered irritably. I can't believe it. Kurenai said as she walked with Asuma through the bowels of the arena to head to the medic bay to tend to her students. Takigaku brought their Jinchuriki here? Why? And how could a Jinchuriki be a genin? Asuma shook his head and lit up a cigarette, not getting any comments from Kurenai, thus showing how worried she was. You're saying that like Naruto isn't one too? Jinchuriki are people, Kurenai. She had the good sense to look shamefaced at that, and even if one is really strong, their village doesn't have to promote them. Remember that most Jinchuriki aren't exactly the most reliable in team situations, so how would one be promoted to a position to lead a squad? Naruto's actually the rare Jinchuriki that's stable. This is just a show of force for Taki to get them clients. Fu isn't going to be promoted no matter what. That's terrible. Kurenai said before remembering what Fu did to Kiba and Hinata. She seemed so angry. Enraged, even when she had the upper hand on Hinata. How could anyone be so violent? You're going to remember that, aren't you? Asuma asked, getting a nod from Kurenai. Good. Could you possibly see Naruto ever being like that? Kurenai shook her head, and what does that tell you? You know how people treated him and he didn't end up anything like Fu. It tells me that we are all very lucky that his will is so strong. Kurenai said with a frown on her face, because he has every excuse in the world to be the one who's angry like that girl. Hey, you're not a genius. Who cares? Read this and you won't suck at Funjutsu, by Jiraiya. Repeat after me, I am invincible. When your opponent lands a particularly nasty shot in some way and you don't die from it, don't lay there on the ground in an attempt to clear the fuzziness away. This isn't a point spar and there's no standing 8 count. I don't care how many bells are going off in your skull or how hard your body is screaming at you to stay down, idiot. Showing that you're hurt or that they did damage to you only tells your opponent, I'm hurt. Please come hit me again, I think another good one will finish the job. Do not give any tells. Never drop your combat stance. Dropping your stance is the first sign that you're on your last legs. If you can't even keep your body primed to defend itself in the most basic way, you know how it's obvious that you can't go any longer. A perfect example of a guy that never gives any tells is Hatake Kakashi. You could run the kid over with a speeding ox-pulled cart and he'd probably pop back up with a look on his face like, what, that's all you've got? Fucking pussy. Kakashi's facial expressions are the best because half of the time it looks like he doesn't even know he's in a fight. It's got to be the mask. Note to readers, invest in a mask or something that can cover your facial reactions. Chapter 25, Talent Borrows, Genius Steals. Kurenai and Asuma walked into the medic bay and walked until they found the section set up for Team 8. Hinata was unconscious with the battleware clear on her person. Kiba wasn't in the room, possibly still being actively worked on by the medics. Shino was in the room though, sitting away from Hinata's bed in quiet contemplation. As the two Jonin got closer he looked up through his sunglasses. "Kurenye-sensei, Asuma-sensei," he said in an even-toned greeting. Kurenai gave Shino a smile and walked over to him, putting a hand on his shoulder as she kneeled down to pet the whimpering Akamera that had been sitting by the chair. "Are you alright, Shino?" she asked in a concerned voice. A nod came from the young Aburame. "I am uninjured, Kurenye-sensei, do not worry about me." He then spared a glance over to where his female teammate lay asleep. "The others though weren't as lucky as myself." "How are they?" Asuma asked, feeling a little bit of concern himself. "Hey, they were all Konoha ninja, his team and their team were friends and classmates in the academy, and his comrade Kurenai was their sensei." He could show some worry. He even put out his cigarette before entering the room, that was how much he cared. "Hinata will be fine with a day's rest they say, a little sore but nothing more," Shino said informatively before his eyebrows furrowed. Kiba on the other hand needed to undergo intensive treatment, but he should be able to leave once the exams end. "They say we should watch out for the atmosphere shift once we leave and that he should be checked out upon his return to Konoha." "That's good," Kurenai said, sighing in relief at the same time. The brutal kick from Fu to Kiba was exceptionally violent and he had been completely unable to protect himself whatsoever. She noticed the stoic boy shift slightly in his chair, and while for a normal person it could be taken as just that, for Shino it might as well have been him letting out a long sigh. "Shino, what's wrong?" I'm sorry, Kurenye-sensei," Shino said, "I wasn't strong enough to win or keep them safe." Asuma stepped in front of Shino and smiled at him. "It was your first exam, kid, and you're just a rookie. You outdid hundreds of others and you just got unlucky in the team you ran up against. All you can do is prepare for the next time. Those weren't normal genin. Everything will be fine, Shino," Kurenai said reassuringly. "Once you heal we'll get right back to work. Now do you want to head up and watch the rest of the day's fights?" "You can go with Asuma." Shino thought about it for a moment before shaking his head in the negative. "No, I believe it would be better for me to stay here in case Hinata wakes up or Kiba is returned from his treatment." Asuma nodded and turned to leave with a wave. "I'll be heading back up and leaving you with your team then, Kurenai. Make sure they get some rest after all of that." Kurenai nodded and went to go find a seat to go sit with Shino. Taki brought out a Jinchuriki. A said in the aftermath of the last battle, and a user of their kinjutsu as well. They certainly went all out for this exam, didn't they? It's meant to show a village's ability and power for the future, so I don't see a reason not to. The Kazekage said as a method of reasoning, Jinchuriki can be genin as well. As a matter of fact, a lot of them don't rank that high in my experience. The highest ranked one in memory is our absent colleague the Mizukage Yagura. Onaki let out a laugh. "And you see what he's doing, don't you? Killing bloodline users. He's touched in the head." Hiruzen personally wanted to get off of the subject, because the topic of a Jinchuriki always went down an ugly road as a conversational topic. It was just inevitable. "I believe next up is that new hidden village Otagakur." The attempt at switching topics worked as the Kazekage responded, "Yes, the village only sent one team and they made it all this way. I almost had a meeting with the leader of this village a few months ago." Hiruzen raised an eyebrow at this. "Almost? You mean you didn't meet with their leader?" "I'm afraid not, Hokage Dano," the Kazekage said with a shake of his head. A representative from that village would not divulge the identity of his leader, nor was he very forthcoming with the general locale of the village. "I did not trust a meeting with such a figure that deemed himself the Otokage. I'm afraid Suna is still just as in the dark on the village as everyone else." "Otokage," I said before letting out a laugh. "Someone is certainly quite sure of themselves and their village, aren't they? Competitors box. I can't believe it." Ino said quietly now that Fu and Doroba were back in the waiting area with the rest of them. "I can't believe that Hinata, Kiba, and Shino were beaten like that. And another Jinchuriki." She finished with a hissing whisper. "Do we even know how to deal with the first one we found out about yet?" she asked, looking over at Shikamaru. "I'm working on it," Shikamaru said, thinking tediously. The proverbial smoke was pouring from his poor overworked brain. "I need more time. We need to win the next round first, then I'll have all night to actually think of something." Then I'll know more about both of them if they advance. Shikamaru had directly instructed them all not to go jackhammer until it was necessary. In all honesty, the Iwa team from the first round weren't that difficult to defeat at all. Naruto probably could have done it by himself or only one of them with him at the most, but that wouldn't have shown good judgment, thus they wouldn't have been promoted just from that overwhelming show of force. Now though, with the knowledge of two Jinchuriki in the exams and knowing the caliber of the opponents they were to face next round, they wouldn't have much of a choice in the matter. Naruto was looking over at Fia, who was leaning against a wall looking out onto the field, not paying anyone else any mind. She was so angry about being revealed to be a Jinchuriki. She cried for a second, so I'm not the only one that doesn't enjoy being one. Ai-kun. What? Naruto said abruptly, getting shaken back into focus by Ino, who was looking at him curiously. What's up, Ino-chan? Kiba was really hurt out there. Ino said, rubbing her arm sheepishly, I think this is really the first time that I'm getting the point of how dangerous these exams are. Even Hinata took a beating out there. I didn't think I'd even see her fight, let alone take that kind of punishment. Naruto frowned at remembering what had happened. She went right at that Fia girl though. It was pretty surprising. Hinata-sama's spirit may have been impressive, but without the talent to back up that fire, it was her fate to fall. Neji interjected as he walked past Team 10, as you saw, it was her destiny to be a failure despite her status in the clan. That bastard just had to raise Naruto's hackles again, didn't he? No one was talking to you. Shikamaru said to Neji once he saw Naruto clench his fists tightly. Honestly, there's no need to try and start such a troublesome situation for no reason. Trying to be the voice of reason was such a pain in the ass. Neji turned towards Shikamaru with a smirk. It is just the truth. It's not my problem that your teammate can't accept his own fated status as a failure. He must empathize with Hinata-sama's plight to try to prove herself. Is that it? Naruto growled at Neji and made to step forward before Shikamaru spoke up again. Well, if Naruto's a failure, then what am I? You are merely a slacker. Neji explained calmly, crossing his arms over his chest. This has no bearing on your fate though. You are destined for the future of mediocrity, not necessarily failure. So are you saying that I'm destined to be mediocre because I slack, or I'm destined to slack because I'm mediocre? Shikamaru asked Neji with a raised eyebrow, because if it's the first one, I can stop slacking if I felt the need to, so would that make me extraordinary? Or if I was just born awesome, then wouldn't my slacking not matter? What's the point of trying to be great if it's your fate? Won't it just happen anyway? There's so many places I can go with this. I just really want an answer though. A small smile came to Shikamaru's face. You sounded so much like you knew what you were talking about, so how about it? Neji could of course tell when Shikamaru was poking fun, thus he didn't bother responding. He merely walked along away from Team 10. Naruto was more than happy to see him leave and then looked down to his fists to see that Ino had managed to loosen one and get her hand to wrap around his, probably to keep him from stepping forward to smack Neji one. Something that would have gotten them disqualified. The understanding smile he got from Ino got him to calm down even more than Shikamaru's shooing away of Neji did. Sorry about that. Thanks Ino-chan, Shikamaru. I was really about to hit that jerk. Naruto punched his palm. I'm going to stomp Neji's ass and I'm not going to stop until I'm wearing socks made of dried sh. Okay, whatever. Just be cool. Shikamaru said in an advisory manner, ignoring the rather graphic threat. If it really is that big of a deal to you, then all you have to do is wait until next round. Until then it's time for the next fight. It's Team 7 against those Otogu. Come on Goldie-kun, it's Sasuke-kun's turn. Ino said suddenly at the reminder of the next match as she dragged Naruto over to the railing to watch, cutting Shikamaru off mid-sentence. I wonder what he learned over the last month. With a sigh, Shikamaru shoved his hands into his pockets and walked over to watch the fight as well. Playing straight man to Naruto and Ino's over-the-top natures was a tiring endeavor, at least for him anyway. In a separate box seating area, Gato looked rather unpleased as he gazed down at the field. An older batch of Iwagakure genin that he had given more than ample monetary motivation to perform their job failed to kill even one of Team 10. The Konoha squad didn't even find it necessary to resort to killing one of them to survive the battle. Oh well. He still had one chance left at exacting some kind of revenge on one of the genin teams that screwed him over. His Oto associate assured him that his genin were more than capable of accomplishing their goals. All of the work he had gotten out of Otogakure had proven that in the past, and the Otokage had assured Gato that his genin team would be going for nothing less than the kill against Team 7. On the field stood Sasuke, Chuji, and Sakura facing off with the mummy-looking Dosu and his partners that looked quite confident. Kin seemed to be looking at Sakura as if she would walk right through her, something that earned her some measure of ire from the pink-haired girl. Zuko just looked at Chuji and couldn't stop chuckling, especially since Chuji was still eating chips at the time. The look on Sasuke's face was cool and calm by design, but the fact was that he was extremely excited to finally get his own fight out of the way. He barely registered Seki asking him which side of the coin flip he wanted, tails. The coin was sent up and landed heads up, thus the pick went to Team Dosu, one-on-one matches. Kin and Zuko smirked at that. The chances of getting a kill in one-on-one matches was higher than in a team battle where teammates could save others. Fine. Sasuke said, not caring too much one way or the other how he got to fight as long as he was provided the opportunity to do so. The two teams headed off on their own to decide who would be the first to fight whom on the Oto team, so, who wants to test the water? He didn't have any problems with going first, it might make things go faster, but it was about more than him in this instance. This is my chance. Sakura thought to herself before taking a deep breath, I'll do it. She volunteered with a serious look on her face. Chuji stopped eating for a moment to look at her in surprise. What exactly had he missed while he had been training with his father again? This was certainly new. It was either Sasuke or him that went in first to fight, it was kind of the reason he had become more confident in his own abilities. Are you sure, Sakura? Sasuke or I could fight first if you aren't. I'm sure, Chuji. Sakura said resolutely before putting a smile on her face, I've got to stop following along sometime, don't I? I can do it. She turned towards Sasuke to see if he would offer any sort of dispute towards her fighting first. Sasuke merely gave her a normal even-tempered look, only this one came with a nod of a seemingly appreciative nature, go on then if that's what you want. That nod was more or less as close as anyone was going to get to hearing Sasuke say, I believe in you, at least as close as anyone was going to hear in this century. On the other hand though, from their area off away on the other side of the field, Dosu managed to somehow hear every word that was being said over on Team 7's side over the low waiting rumble of the crowd. It seems the little girl wants to play at Kunoichi and go first. I'll take her then. Kin said, flipping her very long black hair back, someone has to put the princess in her place. With that she turned and strode confidently out to face Sakura, this time on the stone bridge spanning the stream in the arena. She looked over the younger girl and scoffed, are you sure you want to fight me, sweetie? You might mess up your manicure. Sakura let out a humorless laugh with an unamused smile on her face, as long as I get to mess your face up too I don't think I'll mind too much. Catfight. Genma thought to himself before shaking that thought out of his head, Kami, what's wrong with me? They're like 15 years younger than me. Clearing his mind of the previous thought, Genma started announcing, first round match, fight 1, Hara no Sakura of Konoha vs. Chuchi Kin of Oto. Begin. Sakura drew a kunai while Kin drew a trio of senbon. Both of them jumped away from the other, thinking that their opponent would throw their weapons. When nothing initially happened, Sakura took it upon herself to act first and quickly used her free hand to throw shuriken at Kin, which she easily dodged. Ha! Kin responded in kind with her own attack of senbon, one of which came close to hitting Sakura as it bounced off of the surface of the stone bridge near her leg. Once Sakura turned to run, you'll need more than Cookie Cutter Academy crap to beat me. Chasing someone was such a pain, but if Sakura was going to run, the fight wasn't going to end until she ended it herself. As she neared the forested section of the field, Sakura made a quick set of hand seals, Bunshin no Jutsu, Clone Jutsu. Making several copies of herself that all split off and headed into the forest in an attempt to confuse Kin, Sakura already had her main plan set in mind. It wasn't like a forested environment was foreign at all to Kin, thus she had no problems with the shift in the combat zone. As far as she was concerned, it was just a lowly attempt to throw her off guard. Just because you're a Konoha ninja doesn't mean you stand a ghost of a chance in this place with me. You sure do like to talk a lot. Sakura's voice was thrown through the area to reach Kin's ears as she entered the foliage. A simple trick. It seemed like all Sakura could do to fight were simple tricks. You know, your rookie friends that won their first fight earlier might have done nothing but run away until the very end, but at least they made it interesting. Do you really think I couldn't tell which you was the real one? She asked before the sound of a cord snapping directed her attention down to a broken wire. No, I didn't think you could, because you didn't. A series of kunai flew from the leaves at Kin, forcing her to dive out of the way to dodge. That was too eas dash. No, I was supposed to jump this way. As she thought that a log swung down from the branches directed right at her. Kin jumped over it to stick to the surface of a nearby tree that the log slammed into, dislodging her and knocking her to the ground. That trajectory was dead on. How'd she set it up that well with less than a minute? Sakura jumped out from her place of hiding with her kunai still in hand and landed on the ground with barely a sound before taking the opportunity to rush Kin directly. The slight noise provided by the quiet footfall told Kin where Sakura was, however, and the Otokunoichi was quite angry with her at the moment. Kin glared deeply at Sakura before throwing more senbon at Sakura. Once I dodge these, she won't have any time to grab any more, and she won't have any weapons with her that I can see either. Sakura thought as she moved towards the side, avoiding the weapons. Alright, now let's dash. She stopped in her tracks and fell backwards, senbon stuck in her abdomen. Luckily she wasn't hit in a soft spot, though it still hurt damnably. What? I dodged them. So sorry. Kin said sarcastically as she got back up off of the ground, but you dodged the ones with bells. She pointed where her discarded senbon had wound up and Sakura saw that small bells had been tied onto the ends of them. I threw ones without bells to attract your attention so you wouldn't react to the second set that didn't have them. Kage Shuriken, Shadow Shuriken, ... Shikamaru and Naruto's eyes turned to Ino, who was watching the battle with her cheek in her hand as her fingertips drummed the railing. She wasn't even dignifying her teammates by paying attention to the fact that they were looking at her. She did manage to speak though. That doesn't mean that she's better than me with senbon. Her aim is terrible. She just has a trick that I'm going to steal when I find out a better way to do it. Shikamaru shrugged at the idea. Well, it would fit in with the theme we seem to have with shadow-named techniques. A thoughtful look came onto Naruto's face. I know a move that's kind of like that. Maybe it works the same. I've never actually used it before, so I don't know. Ino turned towards him with a hopeful look in her eyes that got him to back up a step. I will teach you after the exams are over. Ino nodded happily and turned back towards the fight, getting a sigh of relief out of Naruto. Shikamaru laughed and made a sound of a whip, thus getting Naruto to glare at him. Oh, don't give me that look, you know it's true. Shikamaru let out a sigh of his own and shook his head. We all are. He said in a disenfranchised manner. Come on forward. Ino yelled down to Sakura, don't lose like that. If you can't beat her, then you'll never even touch me. Kin heard Ino's attempt to motivate Sakura and turned to look and scoff at the blonde girl. So I guess being allowed, fake kunoichi just runs rampant through Konoha's ranks. How could weak girls like you ever think you could win here? She finished, throwing more senbon at Sakura in an attempt to finish her off. The needles hit Sakura before in a puff of smoke a log lay on the ground in her place. Sakura had made the hand seals for the kawarimi while Kin had been busy with her attention turned towards Ino. As Kin started looking around for Sakura, the trees around her began to shake off a large amount of leaves due to movement. So now you're a squirrel? I guess you would be a rodent, wouldn't you? The leaves around Kin slowly began to change in appearance from leaves to cherry blossom petals, and as they fell around her and on her they began to cut her. So this was Sakura's trap? Kin wasn't about to stay there if that were the case, and she made to run out of the falling cherry blossoms, but as she did so they brushed against her and cut her further, and running through them kicked up the multitude of petals already on the ground, forcing them to cut her as well. Kin was caught in a torrent of cherry blossoms made by her own doing and yelled in pain due to all of the cuts that were piling up all over her face and body. In the real world, however, there was nothing happening. At least not on the scale of things from Kin's point of view. Sakura actually had been in the trees though, and she had been intentionally forcing leaves to fall to mask the activation of her genjutsu that seemed to be working beautifully. Sakura Hanakaba no Arashi, Cherry Blossom Razor Storm. And now it's time to finish. Sakura said to herself before jumping down from her perch and landing directly on top of Kin, knocking her unconscious. Ow, next time I'll need to finish better. She muttered to herself, rubbing her backside after her fall. Getting up and looking down at Kin, Sakura poked at her limp body with her foot before walking away. Thanks for the help, Kakashi-sensei, she said quietly to herself. Winner of match 1, Haruno Sakura. Sakura smiled brightly and waved to the crowd while holding her wounds from Kin's weaponry, a rather modest celebration, though in her head it was a different story. Hell yeah. We totally kicked that bitch's ass. I know Sasuke-kun had to see that. Wow. Asuma said from the stands, sitting beside Kakashi, didn't see that coming. Yep. Kakashi replied with a nice smile at her performance. Sakura had actually done very well. She'd taken a few wounds but she could get that patched right up, just needed a little push. A push, and some genjutsu theory, and a living practice dummy. Still in the vicinity though, sitting right by both Konoha-junin, Guy was still there and he was even more enthusiastic than Kakashi seemed to be about things. Kakashi, your hands-on teaching of your student is reminiscent of my own manly education style. I cannot wait to see what other things you've taught them for the exams. Kakashi just kept looking down at the field for several more seconds before turning towards Guy. I'm sorry, did you say something? Damn you and your hip attitude, Kakashi! Guy exclaimed in a grandiose manner, disturbing the other spectators enough to get popcorn thrown at him. He didn't seem to respond too much, instead focusing on Kakashi. Our competition this time will be between our students. Yes. Whoever has their students advance furthest wins. He neglected to remember the fact that there was sort of a standing bet going on between the Konoha-junin already over the exact same thing. Asuma just stared at Guy before shaking his head as he put a cigarette in his mouth. Goddamn man, I would just love to live in your world for just 3 hours or so. I don't think I'd get much done, but I don't think I'd care too much either. On the field, Sakura was given rest to allow herself to patch herself up since no medical treatment could be given to active competitors. Thus Sasuke walked down for the next fight, this time facing off against Dosu in the usual starting place of the Zen Garden. Sorry about this. Nothing personal, it's just that we have to kill you and yours. You in particular, Uchiha Sasuke. A usual smirk of amusement came from Sasuke. Well, this is embarrassing. You seem to know who I am and I don't have a clue who you are. My name is Desh. I never said I cared enough to find out. Sasuke interrupted in an attempt to infuriate his opponent prior to the battle at hand. I just said that it was embarrassing that I don't know who you are, mostly for you. But I guess it really doesn't matter though. He set himself in his combat stance in preparation for the start. Kin let her guard down and underestimated your teammate. Dosu said, narrowing his single visible eye at Sasuke, that won't happen again with you. I guarantee you'll remember my name since it will be the last thing you ever hear. Match 2, Uchiha Sasuke of Konoha vs. Hinata Dosu of Oto. Jay shouted, getting everyone's attention. Sasuke was more or less an attraction to the event off of name value alone. Just calling out his name got a mass of cheers from the people. Begin. Wasting no time at all, Sasuke and Dosu rushed at each other head-on without hesitation. Sasuke moved to strike first, but stopped himself and instead jumped back when from one of Dosu's long sleeves he revealed a metal gauntlet with pores throughout it on his right arm and attempted to punch him. Sasuke felt a strange ringing in his ears that made him feel slightly lightheaded but found no reason for it. Literally nothing had happened in that exchange. Dosu seemed to smile under his bandages once he saw Sasuke activate his two-toed Sharingan to continue the fight. He held up his gauntleted arm and beckoned Sasuke forward as if asking him to attack again. In response, Sasuke threw a kunai that Dosu blocked with his gauntlet before the Oto Genin rushed forward to take Sasuke down. He had his right arm cocked back and ready to attack before he ever even got close to Sasuke, something that the young Uchiha saw in slow motion due to his Kekai Genkai. In response to Dosu's direct attack, Sasuke retreated back away from Dosu and jumped onto one of the elevated meditation rocks in the Zen Garden, watching intently as Dosu jumped at him to attempt another attack. Sasuke didn't even let him get close before jumping off of the rock and over Dosu, a direct attack. He really seems to want to fight me with taijutsu. Even as he thought this, Sasuke was steadily getting a headache and he simply couldn't comprehend why. He couldn't comprehend why until he got a good glimpse at Dosu's right arm. He had been intentionally swinging it wantonly during his sprint up to Sasuke, and even when Sasuke jumped from his perch on the rock he still went through with his punch. Sasuke didn't know why until he noticed a faint glow with his own heightened eyesight and perception. It was chakra directed through the gauntlet and it was causing Sasuke's headache. What a subtle attack. He hadn't even gotten close to hitting Sasuke yet, and even then he had an increasingly pulsing headache that was steadily getting worse. So that was why after he dodged Dosu's first punch he felt like crap inexplicably. Whatever that arm of his was doing, Sasuke wanted no close-range part of it. And luckily he didn't have to fight like that. Dosu crouched atop the rock that Sasuke had just jumped off of to avoid him once again. Is this all that the almighty Uchiha clan is capable of? Konoha really is a soft village after all if this is what they consider to be a genius shinobi. Heh. Sasuke said with a smirk, not letting the jab get to him. As if he'd fight on his opponent's terms just because of a reason like that. That arm of yours is really interesting. Too bad you can't get close enough to actually do anything useful with it. Dosu stood up from his crouch, seemingly accepting Sasuke's challenge. We'll see about that. He dropped down the backside of the rock out of Sasuke's sight, but even though Dosu moved quickly, concealing his movements as he rushed from rock to rock for cover, Sasuke was able to see and keep track of him. So you want to play whack-a-mole? Sasuke said to no one in particular, though it was directed at Dosu. Fine. Let's play. Sasuke jumped atop a rock and brandished a kunai. At the first hint of seeing Dosu he threw his weapon. Dosu saw the weapon coming and lifted his gauntlet to block his head, but it landed sticking itself in the rock he was about to take cover behind. He averted his path and headed the other way to disrupt Sasuke's tracking of his movements. Dosu wasn't nearly fast enough for Sasuke's body to be unable to keep up with him though. He had been getting beaten up by Hatake Kakashi for an entire month. Not even close to getting away from me. You aren't going to even get close, cover to move behind or not. Sasuke immediately brandished a Fuma shuriken to go with the rest of the kunai he had in his hands to bombard Dosu with. Let's see you dodge this. In one move he threw them all in a widespread manner the moment Dosu emerged from behind cover once more. The sound of the metal flying through the air filled Dosu's ears. You'll never touch me with any of that. He yelled as he jumped onto a rock to avoid the weaponry. Over a dozen metal kunai and shuriken littered the rocks filling the Zen garden, and like Dosu said, none of it ever touched him. I can hear the trajectory of your projectiles and can judge the proper way to dodge them. You'll never touch me with a shuriken. He said before jumping back down into the rock pit, planning to finish closing the distance on Sasuke. What is this? Until he realized that the entire area surrounding the rock he had been on was tangled in ninja wire, making the area look like the nest of a metal spider or something. Looking up at Sasuke on top of his own rock, he saw a wire trailing through his mouth while he had been finishing up a chain of hand seals. Katon, Ryuken no Jutsu, Fire Release, Dragon Fire Jutsu. Fire flew from Sasuke's mouth along his ninja wire and turned the trap into a screaming metal death trap. Knowing that he was trapped while in there and not wanting to find himself trapped in what was to be the equivalent of a stone oven, Dosu jumped back onto the rock that was the center of the wired attention as the fire blazed around the rock. He needed to find a way out because the rock was rapidly heating up. He wouldn't be safe there for long. Sasuke knew he would get him with the jutsu or he would trap him up on the rock out in the open, which would eventually catch fire and finish Dosu. Either way he was easy pickings for what would be next. Give up. Sasuke warned as embers floated through the air, enhancing a rather treacherous appearance that had initially been given by the orange glow of the flames. Sasuke-kun is so cool. Both Ino and Sakura shouted as it looked like Sasuke had his win in hand. Naruto on the other hand leaned against the railing. Come on. I'm cool too. I chucked a fucking machete through a barrier and beat 2 guys at once with brute force and wind chakra. Nobody said anything about that. Shikamaru placed a hand on his shoulder. I told you already, Naruto, guys like us are just designed to be uncool. You can't beat standing in the middle of a raging fire on the cool scale. It's visually magnificent and airheads love it. He said, pointing at Sakura and Ino who were still gushing over Sasuke's tactic. Find a way to make wind chakra look cool and I'll find a way to make creeping shadows look cool. Then maybe guys like us will have a chance. Choji put a hand on Naruto's other shoulder. You get used to it, Naruto, trust me. He's not that cool. Naruto insisted, I mean he's looking at the explosion. Cool guys don't look at their own explosions. Technically it's an inferno, not an explosion. Shikamaru said, with Chuji nodding in agreement. Oh, shut up with your logic and correct definition of words. Naruto wasn't going to let something stupid like common sense and actuality mess up his argument. Hey. Sakura said, turning away from the field and towards Naruto and Shikamaru as her senses had picked up something rather late, did you just call us airheads? Ino seemed to then pick up on that as well and looked equally upset. Shikamaru looked over at her impassively before looking back at the field as if he hadn't been in a conversation beforehand. Hey look, Sasuke is going to finish it. That was all it took to get Ino and Sakura's attention back onto the field, airheads. On the field. At this point Dosu's common sense was crying out for him to give up, but it was his slated mission, it was the mission of his entire team, he was supposed to kill Sasuke Uchiha. Otogaku or ninja did not fail their missions, there was simply no room and no place for it. That was why Team Dosu were the only genin from Oto sent for the exams, because they were supposed to be the only ones necessary, they were the only ones sent to represent Otogaku as a means of showing strength. Even the metal on his gauntlet was heating up enough to burn at the touch now. He couldn't stay on his rock for much longer or he'd just catch a blaze and die soon anyway once the flames grew high and hot enough. Don't do it. Sasuke said, making hand seals and stopping on the tiger seal as he charged up the chakra needed for his next jutsu. Once he saw the subtle shift of Dosu's body, you'll never make it to safety, you'll never even get close. Just give up. He had trapped him. Sasuke didn't even want to actually follow up because unless Dosu quit there was only one feasible way that the fight was going to end. If I give up or lose without taking your head I fail. Dosu said lowly, taking a few steps backwards, if my team loses to all of you then we fail and our village looks weak. If we fail a mission given to us as important by our Otokage then we are dead anyway. So we aren't going to give up by choice. His foot shifted back as if he was preparing to move forward, sorry. I'm telling you if you move dash dot. Let's see if your Sharingan can predict sound. I'm not joking. Neither was I sorry. With that, Dosu ran forward and jumped off of his death trap towards Sasuke, the only other rock he could have possibly reached from his position, his arm set to utilize the abilities of his gauntlet if he got close enough to do so. He didn't. Katon, Gukaku no Jutsu, Fire Release, Great Fireball Jutsu. Sasuke didn't hold back and fired directly at Dosu, hitting him in midair and catching his body ablaze as the fireball stopped him while in flight. He then proceeded to drop down into the fire created by Sasuke's previous jutsu that had trapped Dosu, and from that point all Sasuke could do was stare into the fires of his own creation before snapping out of what he had just done. He turned around and jumped down the clear side of his rock that was left untouched so that he could leave it, and he simply walked away while Proctors headed over to put the fire out. There was no reason for it to be like that. If Dosu had quit then the Proctors could have put the fire out and gotten him away, I was his mission. Sasuke said to himself, trying to reason why Dosu attacked him in the end when there was no logical reason behind it or way that it would work, and he put his life on the line to take mine. Winner of Match 3, Uchiha Sasuke. Shikamaru, Naruto, and Chuji just stared over at the remnants of Sasuke's fight with Dosu without flinching. They were ninja and death was a part of their job description, and Naruto and Shikamaru had killed in the past before as well. Naruto. Shikamaru said plainly. Yeah, Shikamaru. Naruto replied evenly. Shikamaru rubbed his temple as the Proctors put the fire in the Zen garden out. I know you're not really one to surrender or quit in the middle of fights or anything like that, but if you're ever stuck on an isolated rock in the middle of a raging fire and you don't have a way out of it and surrendering is an option, you'd better do it or I'll drag you back from hell somehow to smack the stupid out of you. Got it? Naruto said in full understanding. They then looked over at Sasuke, who wordlessly walked down for his fight. Why didn't he stop the fight for his friend? That didn't have to happen. Chuji could tell what Naruto was thinking as he watched Sasuke descend the stairs towards the entrance tunnel for his fight. Don't worry, he said, getting Naruto and Shikamaru to look at him, I'll ask him that myself right now. He then left to follow behind Sasuke and meet up with Sasuke to switch out for the next fight. Elsewhere in the viewing area, Gaara's eyes were locked on the charred remains of Dosu as the proctors tried to keep it from view of the audience and tried to get it out quickly. Temari and Kankuro could feel the bloodlust around the young man rising and backed off to give him his space. On the field. After a rather short talk between teammates, Sasuke relinquished the fight with Zuko to Chuji. It hadn't even taken that much convincing in order to do so. And so Chuji faced off against Zuko on the barren, mountain-based side of the field instead of the usually chosen neutral starting place of the Zen Garden for obvious reasons. Chuji stared at Zuko, who even in the situation he was in looked back at him with a smirk on his face. "I don't understand why you didn't throw in the towel for your teammate just now," Chuji said. "You had to know he wasn't going to get out of that mess." Zuko let out a cruel-sounding laugh. Dosu was the one that wanted to fight Uchiha. He knew what the score was. "It's our mission to kill Sasuke during these exams, that's what I'm going to do. And once I win here and finish off the rest of the round, I'll just keep on winning until I reach that other Konoha rookie team that advanced earlier. Apparently if I kill them there's a nice little prize in it for me as well." He was talking about Shikamaru's team. This guy didn't just want to kill him or Sasuke, he wanted to kill Shikamaru as well if he got the chance. "You want to kill my friends?" Chuji said with an edge to his voice. "Oh, so Fat Boy can hear after all? I thought that all of that blubber of yours might be clogging up your ears too." Zuko taunted cruelly, setting himself in a fighting stance to prepare for the start. Chuji's frame stiffened at the insult. "What did you just say?" "You heard me," Zuko said. "You're so fat I'm surprised you're not leaving your footprints in the rock." Chuji didn't verbally respond to that jab, his gaze was merely set on the ground so that Zuko couldn't see his eyes. "Start the match." Genma looked over at the younger Konoha shinobi and shifted the senbon around in his mouth before shrugging and looking at Zuko. "Are you ready?" "Oh yeah," Zuko said, cracking his neck to the side. Genma nodded and began the announcement. "Match 3, Akimichi Chuji of Dash. Start the dem fight already. Begin." The Konoha-born proctor said suddenly after Chuji's angry outburst before getting the hell out of the way. There was no way he was staying near that battle if he didn't have to. Baika no Jutsu, multi-size jutsu. Chuji's body ballooned outward to a rounded and expanded appearance in the abdomen that Zuko took a step back at seeing. "Now you're dead, you bastard. Stop me if you can." He then tucked his limbs and head inside of his clothes to give himself a massive ball-shaped appearance. "Holy crap!" Zuko exclaimed, taking a jump back away from Chuji at the sight of him. "What the hell is that?" "Nakuden Sensha, human bullet tank." Chuji's ball form began to roll in place, picking up momentum before it moved forward towards Zuko with the intent of running him over and squashing him. "You've got to be kidding me." Zuko growled to himself at the sight of the incoming Chuji. "There's no way I'm going down like that." He put his arms straight out to reveal hollow tubes open through his palms, Zankyuha, decapitating airwaves. From the tubes in his arms a harsh blast of air came out that struggled to stop Chuji in his tracks. "You can't beat my airwaves." Though he said that, he seemed to be having one hell of a time holding Chuji back from smashing him, even with the wind from his air tubes stopping him. Still, it gave him an opportunity to dive out of the way to avoid being smashed. "Is that the best you've got?" Zuko taunted as the ball rolled away from him and didn't turn back around. "Are you running?" "I don't blame you, fatso." Despite the insult, Chuji just kept rolling on away, not even bothering to turn back around towards Zuko. Feeling triumphant, Zuko smirked and figured that he wasn't able to see or hear anything while in that form and proceeded to chase after him to finish him when given the opportunity. What he didn't realize or seem to notice that Chuji had, however, was that the barren, rocky area that they had chosen to fight in was sloped and uneven in many places with hills and craters and all kinds of things, and against the wall that was at the end of the field the terrain turned into something of a makeshift ramp against it, a ramp that Chuji rolled himself up once he reached it as far as he could go. Then he rolled back down in the exact opposite direction. Now if Zuko could barely stop Chuji when he had started from a dead stop on flat ground, how would he fare now that Chuji had been rolling for quite some time and had even gotten a boost from rolling himself down a ramp on very uneven ground? It was just simple physics. Hey, spending 6 months on a team with Sakura and spending years and years hanging out with Shikamaru had to rub off somehow. So now coming with at least 3 times the momentum, Chuji flew right at Zuko, who stopped in his tracks once he saw the ball roll up the side of the wall and right back down coming right towards him. block this. Chuji shouted mid-roll. And Trizuku did, firing up his air tubes for a blast that was at least twice as strong, Zankyu Kyakuha, extreme decapitating airwaves. But a blast twice as strong just wasn't enough for what was at least 3 times the original force of Chuji's own jutsu, thus it did not stop the rolling this time around, and Chuji rolled right over him, smashing Zaku into the ground and even staying on him for an extra moment to spin his wheels, pulverizing the rock with his own spinning before rolling off of Zaku. Genma immediately headed over to where Zaku got hit and looked at the groaning, broken body of Zaku that was still alive, but he sure as hell wouldn't be getting back up. Winner of Match 3, Akimichi Chuji. Haruno Sakura, Uchiha Sasuke, and Akimichi Chuji advanced to the next round. In the competitors' box, Shikamaru let out a chuckle as the crowd cheered for the victorious Team 7, that guy more or less dug his own grave right from the start. Nearby, Sakura nodded with an awkward smile on her face. Yeah, it kind of didn't take anyone on the team long to figure out that calling Chuji fat wasn't really the smartest thing to do. She turned back to the field where they had managed to peel Zaku off the ground and put him on a gurney. Still, that was kind of violent, wasn't it? Naruto gave Sakura a deadpan stare and pointed over at Sasuke. Sakura-chan, he just set a living human being on fire and you're talking about the way Chuji won being violent. He then looked over at Ino, who had her mouth open ready to speak, and if you say that's different you're full of crap, Ino Buta-chan. Stop calling me that. Ino seethed out through clenched teeth while Sakura had to, if nothing else, giggle at hearing someone else make fun of the meaning behind Ino's name. As she kept laughing, Sakura couldn't imagine anyone on her own team calling her the nickname that Ino usually lambasted her with. I can't believe your own teammate calls you that. She managed to get out between her laughter. Her laughing stopped however once Gaara and his teammates walked past her on their way to the stairs to enter the field for their turn. All of them noticed that unlike his siblings that didn't pay any of them any mind, Gaara made direct eye contact with Naruto as he passed, if only for a moment. The feeling of the temperature of the room dropping left once Gaara and his team exited to head to the field. Kabuto saw this and walked over from his own team to talk to the rookies. Wow, even I felt that. He looked at Naruto. What did you do to make that guy so mad? The older genin inquired. Naruto didn't know how to respond other than with the only answer he could come up with, I got in his way, I guess. He replied vacantly, still looking at the stairwell Gaara had descended even though he was no longer there. I kind of had a run-in with him during the last part of the exam. Really? Kabuto said before laughing nervously. Well, my team is probably going to have to fight him next round, so did you get anything out of his skill set? Sand. Naruto said, lots and lots of sand. Stay the hell away from it. A frown came across the silver-haired, bespectacled young man. That's it? You don't have any real advice to help anyone fight him. Well, what are your abilities then? What can you and your team do? Naruto asked Kabuto in return. I can't tell you how to fight him if I don't even know how you fight. A smile came to Kabuto's face. That sounds like fishing to me, but us? We're nothing special. He said in a modest, pleasant fashion. Oh. Naruto said in understanding before turning to the field to watch the fight. That's easy then. Whether he knew it or not, everyone including Neji and Team Guy as well as Fu and Doroba were listening to him. You run. Naruto said without hesitation, you run or you quit. That's it. Kabuto asked him in disbelief, you're kidding, right? Well, you can die too. Was the dry response from Naruto. That's always an option. He can't harm Fu. Doroba said in an opinionated manner, though said girl seemed to be listening to what Naruto had to actually say. Sand? That's all he has. Neji scoffed over with Team Guy. Don't try to offload your own fears onto the rest of us. A few of us aren't outright failures like some. Tenten and Lee looked at Neji in an almost disgusted manner and shook their heads. That managed to get an angry look from Naruto directed at Neji, though he just let it drop. Neji was ignorant and he didn't know what the Doroba guy's problem was, thinking that Fu could beat anyone just because she was a Jinchuriki. I don't really care what you think. On the field, Gaara, Temari, and Kankuro stood across from the team from Ame that had made it to the finals. The similarly dressed Oboro, Mubi, and Kaguri, all with their breathing apparatuses, waited at the ready. Tails. Sekka commented on the preceding coin flip. Soon a team chooses. Before anyone could even take a chance to think about it, Gaara spoke up, "Team battle." He said plainly, surprising his own team that expected him to rather fight alone. Not willing to question Gaara due to knowing firsthand what Gaara was like, having cleaned up a few of Gaara's messes in Suna, Sekka merely backed out of the way, far out of the way, all the way out of the Zen garden. Poor bastards, why did they pick this terrain to start in? Just for the sake of a face-off. A sandy area with rocks littering the vicinity, not the best of choices to be made in his opinion and experience. First round match, one team battle only. Sabaku no Gaara, Temari, and Kankuro of Suna vs. Oboro, Mubi, and Kaguri of Ame. Begin. Temari grabbed the large fan from her back and Kankuro took the bandaged bundle from his back to prepare to fight, but Gaara's voice stopped them. "No. Just stay out of my way," he said as the cork on his large gourd of sand popped off the top of it. "Are you sure, Gaara?" Kankuro asked tentatively. He involuntarily took a step back when the sand began to filter out of Gaara's gourd. "Leave," Gaara reiterated with more of an edge this time to get his point across, "or I'll kill you too. I don't need either of you to finish the exams at this point. I could have killed either of you any time after the second exam. You're in my way." Kankuro growled to himself, but Temari put a hand on his arm and shook her head, choosing to listen to Gaara and get the hell out of the way. "You think you can just leave?" Oboro said, his voice restricted by the breathing apparatus. "Sorry, but you're not that lucky." As he said that, multiple eerie black forms of the Ame team came from the surrounding rocks and even rose from the ground all throughout the Zen garden. "You're staying right here where we want you, surrounded." That statement was responded to by Temari when she took her fan and let loose a swing of it that cut a path through the black copies, making them look like inky illusions as she and Kankuro just kept on walking their way out of the Zen garden. "We're not leaving because of you," she said calmly. "We're leaving because of him," Kankuro said, jerking his head back towards Gaara before continuing on after Temari. "You guys should just quit now while you're ahead." Kaguri scoffed, his voice also distorted by his breathing apparatus. "You think only one of you can beat all three of us?" Kunai from different angles flew at Gaara's unmoving form only to be stopped harmlessly by a shield of sand holding them in place before they dropped to the ground harmlessly. Gaara's response was the entire amount of the sands in the Zen garden whipping around in a torrent. In the midst of all of this, Gaara stood there calmly in the center with his arms crossed and an emotionless expression on his face. "You're annoying me," he said as the sand settled to reveal himself standing all alone in the area. The entire place was still as the audience just watched and waited for something, an ambush on Gaara's person, something. They weren't let down as this time a multitude of more exact copies of Team Oboro emerged, wearing their actual clothes and looking just like them. "Clones," Gaara said in his gravelly voice, "I hate clones." More sand began to rush about dangerously, smashing about and stripping the surfaces off of the rocks in the Zen garden, but not doing any damage to the clones even to dispel them, nor were there any cries of pain or alarm. But they had never left the Zen garden. If they had, then Kankuro or Temari would have done something. Gaara looked around the entire battlefield, ignoring the largely useless clones of theirs that weren't doing a thing but standing around. No sign of them anywhere. That really only left one place for them to be, and they wouldn't have tried it at a distance with their useless clones littering the immediate area. Thus Gaara kneeled down and placed his hand on the ground, burying it into the sand. He seemed to be patiently fishing for something and seemed to find it after not too long. "Sabakukyu, sand binding coffin, ... With that being said, Gaara pulled his hand out of the sand and shortly thereafter the three Ame ninja emerged from the ground before being lifted into the air, suspended there by the sand entirely encasing their bodies. "You're from the village of Rain, correct?" They didn't respond to Gaara's question as they were busy wondering what the hell was happening and why they couldn't get free despite their attempts to struggle. It was impossible for them. This suited Gaara just fine, however, because the question had been rhetorical and he hadn't necessarily cared one way or the other about their answer. He instead lifted his arm into the air with his hand held wide open. "Well, let's make it rain blood," he said darkly before making a tight fist with his outstretched hand. "Sabaku Sauso, sand waterfall funeral." And that was it. The sand imploded and crushed all of Team Oboro, and much like the name of the second of Gaara's chaining techniques, the blood fell from the sky and showered the Zen garden with gore. The crowd collectively began to freak out at Gaara's one-man decimation of an entire team as he filtered his sand back into his gourd and calmly walked away. Over with the proctors, Jay grabbed Sekka by the front of his clothing looking angry. "You knew that was going to happen, didn't you?" he accused, seeing the way that Sekka had been treating Gaara since being asked to oversee the beginning of the fight. "If one had the audacity to call it that, why didn't you tell us that was going to happen?" "There was nothing we could do," Sekka said in a calm manner. The medic nin yanked himself from the bald Kumonin's grasp as he did so. "You couldn't stop Gaara even if you had known what was going to happen. It wouldn't have made a difference. That's not a regular genin, he's not even a regular person." "What is he then?" Genma asked, still not particularly over the rather graphic deaths of an entire genin squad. "Just like that girl from Taki, only 10 times worse. He's Suna's nightmare," Sekka said, shaking his head. "He's our Jinchuriki." He moved away from his fellow proctors to announce the results that were clear for all to see, the winners of the team battle and advancing to the next round, Sabaku no Gaara, Temari, and Kankuro. Not even polite applause was given. And Genma could now officially say once and for all to everyone that still had their problems with Naruto that Konoha had absolutely nothing to complain about when it came to Naruto being their Jinchuriki if that was what other villages had to deal with in their genin Jinchuriki. I hope everyone watching this at home figures that out. For Kami's sake, that was just. Everyone in the competitors' stand that had borne witness to the demise of the Ome genin had no words for what they had just seen. The way Sasuke killed Dosu in the last round was one thing, what Gaara had done was something else completely. The only one there that wasn't surprised was the only person there that had actually experienced it firsthand before. Naruto let out a sigh to disguise the discomfort he felt, evident by how tight his hands were clutching the railing. He had already seen what Gaara, Temari, and Kankuro could do when his clones went at them in the caves, but having Gaara's sand defeat actual people was something else to see altogether. I knew that was going to happen. I didn't think there'd be so much blood though, he said to himself quietly, and damn it, we still haven't seen anything that we can really take advantage of. Shikamaru's mind was racing though. Okay, he doesn't move and he doesn't like to have his team anywhere around him, ever. And we are staying right the hell out of that sand trap garden if I have to pin our feet to the ground somewhere else. We need more. Next it was that Kabuto Guy's cloth-faced teams turned to fight against the team of older Kiri Ninja. They were already on the field, ready to go. I hope whoever wins can push the hell out of them next round. The battle was mostly underwhelming thus far, more of a dogfight than most of the other matches that had been fought, but there wasn't much to see other than the guy that could stretch his body and the guy that could absorb chakra on Kabuto's team. Kabuto himself seemed to be really good at dodging attacks and quite alright at taijutsu, and as they took the win they got their round of applause, but Shikamaru wasn't given much confidence after that first showcase that next round would be any tougher for the team from Tsunagakure. A pretty boring series of one-on-one fights led conversation to break out again prior to the 30-minute break between rounds, though just like before there was no one approaching the Suna team or Taki's team who finally got their third wheel hooky back from the medical bay. This led to Naruto actually taking a minute to go out and get himself something to drink due to thirst, also to give himself a minute to smoke a cigarette. He felt like he deserved one after round 1 and that he needed one after seeing Gaara obliterate those other genin. He took long enough to finish one cigarette off before stepping on the butt of the cigarette on the ground on his way back to the viewing balcony. On his way back he found Fu sitting on the stairwell by herself and stopped walking, standing to her side less than 15 feet away. He felt like walking back to the viewing area was the smartest move at the time, but for the life of him he just couldn't bring himself to do it. From the angle he was standing at he could see her eyes. While she didn't seem nearly as angry or irritated as she did when she was around people, as a matter of fact she seemed to like being by herself, he could also tell the look of her eyes, and they were just like the way his used to be. Damn it, he was going to get killed in a stairwell between rounds. Who dies during the intermission? That would be the lamest thing conceivable. Well, at least being a nice guy would only wind up with him dying alone, worst case scenario. Not Shikamaru or Ino this time. Maybe they'd promote him posthumously? Nah, they'd call his trying to talk to Fu by himself a tactical fault and he'd never get that sweet flak jacket, even if he otherwise would have gotten it laying on his grave. Hey! Naruto said, noticing Fu's eyes immediately dart to the side towards him. allowing her to see him through the handrail set up on the stairs she was sitting on. "What are you doing out he dash dot? I'm not staying in that room with all of those people just to watch a shitty fight between people I'm never going to face," Fu said, cutting him off tersely as she narrowed her eyes at him. "Now what are you doing out here?" He was tempted to mouth off and say that technically he was supposed to fight next again once the intermission was over, but making an enemy out of another fellow Jinchuriki was not high on his list of things to do at these exams. "Just taking a walk to clear my head, kind of like you I guess. Do you mind if I sit down?" "Yes," Fu said, lifting a hand and making a fist to crack her knuckles with just the motion of doing so. "I do mind. Now beat it, kid, before you wear out what little welcome you had and I beat you." There was a low and underlying killing intent coming from Fu, but when Naruto took a step back it lessened slightly. "I don't want to fight, yet anyway. Not until I win the next round," he said as he leaned against the wall in the hallway. "I heard what that guy said, your teammate." Fu's eyes turned away from Naruto to look down the stairs at the reminder of her outing as a Jinchuriki last round. "So what? All that means is that more people I've never met are going to think I'm a monster, just like always." "You're not a monster," Naruto argued in return. "What would you know about it?" She snapped in return, looking at her hands. "You saw what I did out there to that other team from Konoha. And you're telling me you don't want payback? You're telling me you don't think I'm a monster? Every single time I've ever touched someone since I was a little girl I've hurt them. I break things and I break people without even trying to. So don't give me that crap, because you don't even know, kid." A frown came over Naruto's face before he said his next bit. "Well, you can touch me. I'm pretty sure I won't break." Fu let out a humorless laugh and placed her hand on the metal railing with an oddly sweet smile on her face. "Well, come over here and shake my hand then," she said pleasantly. "Well," she said to come on over. Naruto was pretty sure if she was trying to trap him he could evade an attack easily enough. Thus he took her up on the offer and walked over. The closer he got, the more strained the smile on Fu's face became before he finally heard a strange noise that sounded like metal groaning. "And stop right there," Fu said in a strained voice once Naruto got within 5 feet of her. She let go of the metal railing and Naruto's eyes looked towards it to see that her grip had left a crushing mark in the railing. "You still want to shake my hand? How about give me a hug? Are you still sure you won't break?" The sarcasm was rampant in her speech, getting Naruto to look at her through squinted eyes. "I was serious, you know. It doesn't matter if you were or not," Fu said. "You think you're the first person that tried to be all friendly with me to get me to let my guard down? You're not. The academy teachers, the caretakers, my classmates, so many of them got me to think they were my friends, and when they got close enough they would attack me. They'd say that my abilities with the Nanabe's powers were too weak and report it to the village leader. No one had ever treated Naruto like that when he was a kid. People basically treated him like a leper and went out of their way to stay away from him, but he wasn't attacked by his own villagers or falsely befriended. She was basically telling him that she was befriended just so others could get close enough to force her to activate her abilities with her Biju. That's horrible. Who does that? Technically Jiraiya did, but that was just one person, and he apologized afterwards. Fu was talking about multiple people used to spontaneously attack her to test her skill with her ability and they didn't seem to care. Ignoring him, Fu then punched the rail, bending it thoroughly from the force she used. "So no. I learned that no one ever wants to be around me without causing me some kind of harm. Anyone willing to stick around is just biding their time to attack me. So you can shake my hand, I'll turn your bones into powder, you can hug me too if you really want to, but I'll snap your spine like a hickory stick. You'll wait until I drop my guard at any moment and you'll turn on me. You're my enemy, remember? So slay the monster, kill me, and I bet you they'll just drop a promotion in your lap out of gratitude. Will you stop saying you're a monster? Why does it matter to you? Because if that stupid thing inside of you makes you a monster, that means I'm one too." Naruto yelled at her, taking great care not to step forward to set her off any further. Still, he was going to get his damned point across one way or another. Fu's eyes widened at him before rolling in distrust. Seeing he had to prove it, Naruto backed off and drew his machete, putting Fu on instant alert. Naruto merely dragged the blade of the machete across his hand to draw blood and sheathed it again. He wiped the blood on his pants and showed Fu the light wound. Watching the cut heal visibly right before her eyes, Set fused out back to nearly nothing. No normal person healed like that, you're a dash. Yeah. Naruto said, fishing some medical wrap out of his supply pouch that he began to wrap around his hand, and I know I'm not a monster. Neither are you, and I'm going to prove that to you and everyone one way or another. Having spoken his mind to Fu, Naruto walked past her to head back into the viewing area to link up with his team before the next round began. Once he went further down the hall, he found Sasuke standing on the wall. So what was all that about, Dobe? I heard the echo of you yelling. How much of that did you hear? Naruto asked. None of it. Sasuke replied honestly, but I'm fighting her next. I was just wondering if you told her anything about us to help her team win in case you're scared of taking me on again. He finished with a smirk, because you should be. It won't be as even as it was last time. I agree. Naruto said with a challenging grin, I'm going to beat you way easier this time. We all know I was winning the last fight. In your dreams, Dobe. Sasuke said with a scoff as they began walking back to the waiting area, I must have kicked you in the head too hard the last time. Before Naruto could open his mouth to offer up a sniping response, Gaara's voice stopped them both, Uzumaki. Both Konoha Genin turned around to see Gaara standing in the low-lit hallway staring at the both of them. I'm going to kill you. I just want you to know that. And unlike your friend Uchiha, I did hear what you said to the girl. I want to tell you right now that we are monsters. Sasuke looked ready to defend himself. He could tell something was off with Gaara from the moment he first stood in his presence, and watching him crush 3 genin to a bloody paste didn't really remedy the mindset any. We're not friends. And what are you talking about? Gaara's seafoam-colored eyes turned to Sasuke momentarily. I wasn't talking to you. Shut up or I'll kill you too. Sasuke bristled at the casual threat and turned his Sharingan on in response. Come and try it, you psychotic little dash dot. You're not a monster, Gaara. Naruto said, cutting off Sasuke from forcing the situation to escalate any further. It's what's inside you that's the monster. Don't let yourself become the thing that everyone thinks you are. Dope, what are you doing? Sasuke said, still defensive and with good reason to be so once the cork popped off of Gaara's gourd and sand started filtering out of it. Both of them knew full well what that was used for. Stop trying to talk down the homicidal guy and think of something that will actually work. I don't feel like fighting him in a hallway. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. Gaara said as his sand began to slowly billow about. If they believe I'm a monster, a demon, it's only because I am. From the moment I was born I've killed. I took the life of the woman that brought me into this world. Ever since the age of 6 I've been killing assassins sent after me by my own father, the Kazekage, the man who had the Ichiban no Shukaku sealed within me to make me Suna's ultimate weapon. His sand started to creep along the ground towards Sasuke and Naruto, who both drew weaponry in case it came to a fight. Mother wants both of your blood right now, she's screaming for it. I thought you said your mother was dead. Sasuke said with a kunai drawn and at the ready for all the good it probably wouldn't do. This guy is really insane. If that weren't enough for Sasuke, Gaara began talking to himself right there in front of them. Please mother, just wait. Wait a little bit longer. I promise you'll get more blood soon. Not here, this isn't the place to kill Uzumaki. This isn't the place to kill Uchiha. But I'll make them both pay. I promise. No one will make me disappear. Both Naruto and Sasuke slowly began to back away towards the waiting area while Gaara kept muttering to himself and his mother, not even noticing them creeping away from him. What the fuck was that all about? Sasuke said once they got far enough away. I don't know. Naruto said, wiping a cold sweat from his face once the tension from before died down. He hadn't even known he had been perspiring. I don't think I'll be taking the stairs again for the rest of the tournament though. I think I'll just walk up and down the wall. There were still 10 minutes left in the intermission. Even though the situation had faded out, Sasuke was well aware that he had missed a significant chunk of what the issue was with Naruto, Gaara, and even Fu. Why was Naruto out there talking to her in the first place? Gaara really had a monster sealed inside of his body like Fu? And when he said that they were monsters, it didn't sound like he was simply referring to himself and Fu. It sounded like he was talking about Naruto as well. Naruto has a monster in him too? That had to be what he was talking about. But Naruto isn't anything like either one of them. No way. Why couldn't things be simple and straightforward? They were supposed to be there for a promotion test and now they were stuck surrounded by these Jinchuriki guys and people trying to kill them. Did most other genin taking these exams have to deal with this stuff when they took them? It would have to be pretty hard to dredge up this much crazy and stick it all in one exam twice a year. Hey, you're not a genius. Who cares? Read this and you won't suck at Fuinjutsu, by Jiraiya. Fuinjutsu is just one part of your never-ending war on life. Now, like I said before at the start of this book, it is not only meant to teach you how to make nifty little seals, it is also meant to coach you on life, since if you're reading this book and decided to intentionally specialize in Fuinjutsu you need all the advice and guidance you can get. In an effort to make a man out of you, I will now be giving you a crash course in my true major and life's calling, picking up the luscious ladies. Trust me chums, listen to Jiraiya-sama and you won't be able to keep the women off of you. This is my money-back guarantee to you, the consumer. First things first, being a ninja is cool, to civilians. Civilian girls dig the danger aspect of your life, wishing that it would insert itself into their lives somehow to make their existence less mundane. She yearns to be one of those women seeing her lover off to war like in those books and movies all over the place. If you have a headband, that's the opening for you to buy her a drink. If you have a regulation flak jacket, then you've earned yourself 2 good hours to woo the lass with your stories of awesome. Basically, the more regulation items on your person that signifies that you are elite and important to the Hidden Village military society, the easier it will be for you to hook up. A note to remember though, if you are pursuing a civilian woman, they are high maintenance and a lot of them have gold digger tendencies whether they know it or not. If you are preparing to make a girlfriend or a wife out of a woman like this, then you had better have a lot of free time and funds because you are going to need it. If you're looking to pick up women based off of the merit of your job, then you'd better shoot for a civvy chick. If you're aiming a higher up the totem pole at the pinnacle of human female development, the kunoichi, then you must know this: your rank means little to nothing to them usually. A kunoichi is a ninja just like you. You have about a snowball's chance in hell of going home with a kunoichi that outranks you. It just isn't going to happen. As a matter of fact, even if you're her rank, she won't treat you with any romantic interest without a good reason, such as you saving her life, you being friends with her for years and earning her unconditional trust, you being smoking hot and having her crush on you for years, things like that, so rank is useless. Also you must make sure that if you are going to try and get with a kunoichi that you are just as strong as her or stronger. This is not any sort of chauvinistic bullshit, this is mostly for your safety, because if you piss a kunoichi off, your rate of survival drops depending on how strong she is by multiples of 2 for each rank. They will gain strength past the limits of their normal parameters for every rank past academy student that they obtain. I've done my math over the course of my many years of life, do not dispute me. Who's reading whose book here? I have much more advice than this, I have enough to fill a fucking book. As a matter of fact, I might just do that, but I'll leave you with this gem. The only pickup lines you'll ever need. 1. Hey, my friends over there were wondering if you liked me. 2. Just to get this out of the way, I'd like some sausage and eggs for breakfast. 3. Jiraiya, hey, are you a courier ninja? Hot chick, no. Why? Jiraiya, because I swear you were checking out my package. Hot chick, titters I was. Now ravish me please. Call down the power of the ancient gods and ravish me pagan style, you beast of a man. You're welcome in advance. That's it for part 11. Thank you for watching and see you on the next video.